Chapter 677. Dongfang Jing was a natural spirit race, so it wasn't too strange. After all, Xiaoling Yu had already noticed her uniqueness a long time ago. Every member of the Nature Eldritch clan possessed extraordinary talents, and their rate of cultivation was much faster compared to the average human and Yao cultivators. However, there were very few female cultivators among the Nature Eldritch clan. Generally speaking, they would not marry off to outsiders. Even if they did, they would marry off to some elite experts. To be able to marry a woman from the natural spirit race was a very fortunate thing for many cultivators from both the human and demon races. This was because cultivating with a woman from the natural spirit race for a long time would not only be of great help to one's strength, it would also slowly change one's physique and give birth to outstanding descendants. Back then, although Guan Wei was also an elite of Duhu City, his achievements and status at that time were not worthy of a woman from the natural spirit race. Now, the situation was different. The most important thing was not that Guan Wei was now the second in command of the Huamen, but that he and Dongfang Jing were truly willing to fall in love with each other. Jiang Xingye's attitude naturally made Xiaoling Yu and Guan Wei very satisfied. Originally, the Huamen still had some grudges against the family Jiang, but through this matter, it was naturally written off. Recently, the most terrified people were the Chao clan of the Fortune Realm. Because of the Qing Xian incident, the Chao clan and the head of the Huamen, Xiaoling Yu, had caused quite a commotion. In addition, the Chao clan had invited the old monster Dugu to deal with Xiaoling Yu, forcing Xiaoling Yu to self-destruct a sacred artifact to escape. Although Xiaoling Yu did not have the determination to exterminate the Chao clan, he did not have the slightest good impression of them. Not long ago, the Chao clan had wantonly announced that the old monster Dugu was going to exterminate the Huamen, causing Xiaoling Yu and the Huamen cultivators to feel extremely disgusted. Guan Wei had only lived a few wonderful days after his wedding when he proposed to Xiaoling Yu to exterminate the Fortune Realm's Chao clan. Xiaoling Yu was not a gentleman, nor was he a cultivator who was magnanimous enough to forgive his enemies. After listening to Guan Wei's suggestion, he let Miao Ying take Xiaobing to the Fuda region. Xiaoling Yu, on the other hand, continued to recuperate and work hard to recover her condition and strength. When Miao Ying and Lil Bing returned, Xiaoling Yu's injuries were basically stabilized. With the two saint gods, Miao Ying and Lil Bing, attacking at the same time, the Chao family naturally did not have the slightest ability to resist. Under the ice ceiling domain, no one from such a large family was able to escape. All of them were frozen into ice sculptures and their bodies shattered. However, Xiaoling Yu had instructed Miao Ying to purposely force the Chao family's celestial monarchs to self-destruct and capture their celestial monarch void spirits for the Huamen to cultivate. Without the support of old monster Dugu, in addition to the other narrow-minded saint gods from the deity world who did not dare to offend the Huamen, the Chao family had no one to cry out for justice after being exterminated. Being the second in charge of the Huamen, Guan Wei naturally obtained the celestial monarch void spirit. Furthermore, it was from a late-stage god emperor expert from the Chao family. This could be considered as Xiaoling Yu fulfilling the promise he had unintentionally made. After his injuries were stabilized, only then did Xiaoling Yu take out the storage ring of old monster Dugu to check. Which treasure is the one that the old woman is coveting? As he checked, Xiaoling Yu pondered with interest. There were not many treasures in the storage ring of old monster Dugu. There were not even many pieces of deity crystals. After all, he was a sword cultivator and cultivated sword force. Deity stones and deity crystals were not very useful to his cultivation. He also did not like to use other ordinary treasures. Sword cultivators focused on breaking through 10,000 techniques with a single sword. Old monster Dugu was not a meticulous person. His storage ring was very messy. All sorts of cultivation resources and treasures were placed randomly. There were only 2 jade boxes that were reinforced with seals. Clearly, they were different from other items. Xiaoling Yu took out the 2 jade boxes and opened them separately. Both jade boxes contain a piece of grayish-black metal piece. Xiaoling Yu felt that it was extremely familiar. He could not help but exclaim in surprise. After taking out the two pieces of metal, Xiaoling Yu frowned for a moment before his expression changed. He muttered, "Primal chaos scripture?" At this moment, no matter how ignorant Xiaoling Yu was, he was able to determine that if the grayish-black metal piece in his soul and the two pieces in his hand were combined, it would definitely be the primal chaos spectrum. He ascended to the deity world to search for the primal chaos scripture and take it back. This was one of the most important missions. Who would have thought that it would be completed just like this? He could also guess that he had no enmity with Old Monster Dugu. The reason why Old Monster Dugu wanted to kill him was definitely to gather the primal chaos scripture. That old woman and Old Monster Dugu both want to kill each other. They also want a treasure from each other. It seems that they each have a piece of metal piece. Xiaoling Yu thought for a moment, and the smile on his face grew wider. However, how to gather the three pieces of metal together was a problem. After all, one of them was hidden deep in his soul. Xiaoling Yu tried to drip his blood on it. The result was very disappointing. His blood essence did not fuse with the two pieces of metal. He tried to refine it with the primal chaos fire, but it was also useless. Xiaoling Yu used almost all his methods, but he still did not have a clue. It seems that I can only take a gamble. After Xiaoling Yu made up his mind, he immediately exploded his golden soul pearl. Although it was a gamble, it should not be dangerous. His golden soul pearl had exploded many times. Every time it exploded, the soul power would be instantly absorbed by the grayish-black metal piece. Then, it would be spat out and condensed into a golden soul pearl. If the grayish-black metal piece did not react to the two pieces in his hands, then the danger did not exist. However, if it reacted, the metal piece would fly out of his sea of consciousness. Xiaoling Yu would have to gather and condense his soul power. There would be a huge risk. This was the crux of the matter. If he lost the gamble, his life would not be in danger. Xiaoling Yu could rely on himself to gather the golden soul pearl again. However, it was very likely that his soul realm would drop. After the golden soul pearl exploded, the three grayish-black metal pieces trembled at the same time. The two pieces that were in Xiaoling Yu's hands suddenly disappeared and appeared in his sea of consciousness at the same time. Then, the three pieces of metal joined together. Moreover, the traces of cracks where they joined together quickly disappeared. The three pieces of metal joined together into a rectangular piece that emitted a grayish chaotic radiance. The three words chaotic spectrum on the metal piece were especially obvious. Not only was the radiance more dazzling, but also flowed with mysterious runic patterns like water waves. Xiaoling Yu saw that there was indeed movement. Just as he was about to gather the golden soul pearl himself, he realized that the new chaotic spectrum metal piece was already rapidly absorbing his soul power that had exploded. However, what Xiaoling Yu didn't expect was that as soon as his soul energy was completely absorbed, the essence of his life, including his blood essence, flesh, tendons, and bones, actually couldn't stop it from flowing out. After that, it was brought into the chaotic spectrum by an enormous suction force. There should be no problem. Since that cheap master told me to take back the chaotic spectrum, he will definitely not deliberately kill me. Although Xiaoling Yu was extremely nervous, he quickly calmed down. He did not resist the huge suction force. In fact, he did not have the strength to resist it. In the time of 2 breaths, his body and soul had completely disappeared from the secret room. In this secret room, only the chaotic spectrum metal piece emitted chaotic radiance as it floated in midair. It was especially eye-catching, but no one was looking at it from the side. What surprised Xiaoling Yu even more was that he actually appeared safe and sound in a misty space. His body was fine, and even the golden soul pearl was in his sea of consciousness. Looks like there's still space in this chaotic spectrum. I should have been sucked in. But how can I get out? Xiaoling Yu frowned as he slowly walked in this misty space. Not long after, he encountered an almost transparent light screen. On the light screen, numerous scenes were constantly appearing. However, Those scenes surprised Xiaoling Yu because those scenes were extremely familiar to him. They were scenes that contained the truth of heaven and earth, the laws of nature, and the truth of chaos. However, these scenes were much clearer than those that Xiaoling Yu had seen before. The key points were presented more slowly, so that it was easier for him to understand. These scenes were extremely useful for Xiaoling Yu to strengthen his cultivation base. Xiaoling Yu was deeply immersed in them at a glance, and began to comprehend them eagerly. In the past, Xiaoling Yu's understanding of various truths and laws was still lacking. With the help of these scenes, many things that he did not understand before gradually became clear in his heart, and his realm continued to improve. While comprehending, Xiaoling Yu would also calculate the time. By the time he had seen through all these scenes, more than 10,000 years had passed. He did not continue to look at those scenes. Although there were still many things that he did not understand, he had already deeply memorized them. There would be plenty of time to comprehend them in the future. Not long after leaving this light screen, he found another transparent light screen. However, there were no scenes in this transparent light screen. It was just constantly fluctuating like water waves. Xiaoling Yu was curious. After observing for a long time, he stretched out his hand and touched the light screen. When his finger touched the light screen, his body involuntarily took a step forward. Then, his vision blurred, and he arrived at a place where the fog was even thicker. After stopping here for less than 10 breaths of time, Xiaoling Yu was stunned to see an extremely familiar old man walking towards him. "Child, my good disciple, you have actually reached rank 8 like me," that old man said as he walked. Xiaoling Yu was excited at first, but then his eyes narrowed, and he took a few steps back. "What's wrong, disciple? Don't you recognize me? It's my fault for letting you cultivate alone until now, letting you experience countless hardships and dangers." The old man walked closer with a guilty expression. He even stretched out his hand to touch Xiaoling Yu's forehead with a loving expression. Xiaoling Yu retreated once again, avoiding the elder's touch, and said, "This disciple has not suffered at all. My cultivation has been smooth sailing, and my luck has been extremely good. Why would you say that this disciple has suffered?" Chapter 678. Xiaoling Yu laughed coldly and said, "Although you look very similar and it's hard for me to judge, you were stunned just now. This proves that you're fake." After saying that, Xiaoling Yu waved his hand and shot out a stream of primordial chaos fire at the old man. As soon as the primordial chaos fire was released, the old man's body dissipated like smoke. It seems that there are many illusions and illusions here. They might even cause me to have inner demons. Xiaoling Yu's expression became serious. After all, he did not have the grayish-black metal piece in his soul now. He might not be able to ignore the inner demons like before. But fortunately, Xiaoling Yu had experienced the torment of countless inner demons and had seen too many illusions and illusions. In addition, he had just improved a lot. He was confident that he would not be confused by any illusions and would not fall into the trap of inner demons. Just as Xiaoling Yu expected, he continued to move forward in a straight line and encountered all kinds of illusions and illusions. Occasionally, he would develop inner demons. However, those inner demons did not have much effect on Xiaoling Yu and would not cause his state of mind to collapse. At most, it would cause his state of mind to fluctuate a little. Almost 10,000 years passed unknowingly. Xiaoling Yu found another light screen. However, there was a door of light beside this light screen. There were only 8 words on the light screen. Everything is empty. Appearance is born from the heart. Empty appearance? Xiaoling Yu immediately thought of these 2 words. He felt that there must be a mystery behind it. However, although these 8 words contained endless mystery, they were the best way to torment a cultivator's mind. If he only looked at it with his naked eye and racked his brains to understand it, he did not know when he would be able to understand the essence behind it. Is this light door the way out? Xiaoling Yu looked at the light door again. After thinking for a long time, he decided that it was more appropriate to take a look at the light door first. The light door did not stop him. His body passed through it easily. As expected, After passing through the light door, Xiao Yu returned to the secret room in the ship that he used for closed-door cultivation. The primordial chaos spectrum floated above his head and was still emitting a blurry light. Xiao Yu checked his body again and was surprised to find that his injuries had already healed. His condition was even better. Even the 8 black armor avatars had recovered, as well as his main body. What a treasure! Xiao Yu stretched out her hand and moved the chaos scroll to her eyes, praising with a joyful expression. How do I put it away? After that, Xiao Yu spoke with a puzzled expression, and right after he finished speaking, the chaotic scripture suddenly vanished. Then, he was surprised to find that the primal chaos spectrum was already hidden in his sea of consciousness. Come out! Xiao Yu tried to shout again, and the primal chaos spectrum suddenly appeared in her hand. Haha, great! He couldn't help but laugh out loud. Then, he tried to keep and release the primal chaos spectrum. The primal chaos spectrum had always been very obedient. Take me in. After Xiao Yu shouted this sentence, his body appeared in a space filled with dense fog. Let me out. After shouting this, Xiao Yu was still in the foggy space, which surprised him a little. I guess I can only find that light door if I want to go out. Xiao Yu didn't think too much about it. In less than 4 hours, he found a light door and walked out. If I encounter danger in the future, I'll hide in the space of the primal chaos spectrum. It's definitely much safer than hiding in the 8-legged Tai Chi cauldron. But if I hide in the primal chaos spectrum, won't it be exposed to a strong enemy? Once the primal chaos spectrum is sealed by a strong enemy, won't I be trapped inside forever? Looking at the primal chaos spectrum in his hand that was emitting a mysterious light, Xiao Yu frowned and said, if only it could be hidden. Similarly, as soon as he finished speaking, Xiao Yu was surprised to find that the primal chaos spectrum in his hands had disappeared. Even if he tried his best to search, carefully observed the surrounding space with his divine sense, constantly shook the space, and burned the surrounding space with a chaotic true fire, he couldn't find any trace of the primal chaos spectrum at all. Come out! Xiao Yu shouted softly, and the primal chaos spectrum instantly appeared before his eyes. The satisfaction in his heart was already indescribable. This was only a portion of the primal chaos spectrum's power, and it was already very powerful. No wonder his cheap master valued the primal chaos spectrum so much and told Xiao Yu to take it back, even if he had to risk his life. After putting away the primal chaos spectrum, Xiao Yu left the secret room. Not long after, he saw Guan Yiwei and Dongfang Jing. At this moment, the husband and wife were in front of a window on the ship. They were pressed tightly against it, as if they were admiring the beautiful scenery outside. I say, Brother Guan, you've been married for more than 20,000 years. Why are you still so warm? Xiao Yu greeted with a smile. Only then did Guan Yiwei and Dongfang Jing turn around. Although it was a little awkward, they were still holding hands. Boss Xiao, you can't remember the time when you're cultivating in seclusion. We've only been married for 200 years. Guan Yiwei said with a gloomy face. Cultivators of our generation, the easiest thing to overlook is time. Dongfang Jing agreed. Only 200 years have passed, Xiao Yu said in surprise. Yeah. Guan Yiwei and Dongfang Jing nodded at the same time. Then you guys continue. After Xiao Yu said this, he quickly walked away. He stopped many Hua Min disciples on the ship and asked them one by one. Everyone said in unison that Guan Yiwei and Dongfang Jing had indeed been married for more than 200 years. When Shui Yu and Miao Ying said the same thing, Xiao Yu finally believed this fact. But I clearly stayed in the primal chaos spectrum for 20,000 years. How come only 200 years have passed outside? Xiao Yu was extremely suspicious, but after a while, his eyes suddenly widened as he thought in shock. Could it be that the flow of time in the primal chaos spectrum is different from the flow of time outside? He couldn't help but think of a legend he had heard when he was on Earth, and that was a day in the sky and a year in the Earth. However, this was only a legend that existed in myths and legends, and now, Xiao Yu had encountered such a strange and absurd thing. 20,000 years have passed inside, and 200 years have passed outside. The flow of time is 100 times faster. No. After Guan Wei's wedding, I didn't directly enter the primal chaos spectrum. Instead, I waited for Miao Ying and Xiao Bing to exterminate the Chao clan and waited for my injuries to stabilize before entering the primal chaos spectrum. If that's the case, I've actually been in the primal chaos spectrum for a very short period of time. At most, it's been 2 years. Then wouldn't the flow of time in the primal chaos spectrum be 10,000 times faster than outside? The more Shaolin Yu thought about it, the more shocked he became, and the more excited and happy he became. With this discovery, he naturally didn't have the leisure to pay attention to other things. He hurriedly pulled Miao Ying into a secret room. Seeing Shaolin Yu's slightly red face and his extremely anxious and expectant expression, Miao Ying's face immediately turned red. She pinched the soft flesh on Shaolin Yu's waist and said, "Look at your dead face. You've just recovered from your injuries, and you're in a hurry to do bad things." When Shaolin Yu heard this, he was stunned at first. Then he pinched Miao Ying's perky buttocks and said, "What are you thinking, girl? I pulled you here not to be intimate, but to let you help me calculate the time." "Calculate the time? What's there to calculate the time? Don't you know how to calculate it yourself?" Miao Ying said snappily. "Of course I know how to calculate it, but I'll calculate it inside, and you'll calculate outside." Shaolin Yu didn't explain any further. He immediately said, "Start calculating now. Don't be careless." After that, Shaolin Yu entered the primal chaos spectrum. First, he found a light door, and then patiently waited and calculated the time. After staying inside for 10,000 hours, Shaolin Yu left the light door. "Where did you go just now? Why did you suddenly disappear?" Miao Ying asked in surprise. Before Shaolin Yu entered the primal chaos spectrum, he first hid the primal chaos spectrum, so Miao Ying was very puzzled. "Let's not talk about this first. How long has it been?" Shaolin Yu grabbed Miao Ying's hands and asked anxiously. "I didn't pay too much attention. It should have been about 2 hours." Miao Ying replied, "It's really 10,000 times." Shaolin Yu released Miao Ying's hands and sighed. "What 10,000 times?" Miao Ying frowned. "Let go of your mind. I'll take you to a place." After saying this, when Miao Ying nodded, Shaolin Yu shouted softly, "Take the two of us in together." The primal chaos spectrum did not disappoint Shaolin Yu. After shouting, he and Miao Ying were in a space overflowing with fog. "Where's this?" Miao Ying looked around and asked. "In the space of a magic treasure, the flow of time here is 10,000 times faster than outside. Just now, only spent 2 hours outside, but I spent a total of 10,000 hours inside. Isn't it magical?" Although Shaolin Yu had confirmed this matter, his words were still a little excited. Who knew that Miao Ying just nodded indifferently and said calmly, "Magical." Seeing Miao Ying's reaction, Shaolin Yu was a little disappointed and said, "You don't seem to be excited at all?" Miao Ying rolled his eyes and said snappily, "If this magic treasure was on someone else, maybe I would be very surprised and shocked, but on you, everything is possible. Even if you tell me now that you are the strongest person in the world, I won't be excited." Shaolin Yu was speechless. He sullenly brought Miao Ying to a light door and then went out of the primal chaos spectrum together. After studying the primal chaos spectrum for a while, Shaolin Yu did not find anything else, so he temporarily put this matter aside and sent his doppelgangers to look for Anya and other relatives and friends who might have ascended. The 8 doppelgangers did not find anything, but Guan Wei received a message from a Huamin cultivator, saying that there was a clue. Guan Wei contacted Shaolin Yu, and then the two of them teleported to find the Huamin cultivator who had found something. Previously, a beautiful woman asked me where the headquarters of the Huamin was, and if the leader of the Huamin sect was called Shaolin Yu. After I answered, she disappeared, but I think she looked very similar to a girl that Master Guan had asked me to find. Chapter 679. Linger. Shaolin Yu recognized the woman at a glance. Although he hoped that Anya would be the one to be discovered, he was still happy that he was able to find Linger first. "How long has she been gone?" Guan Wei asked. "He just left not too long ago, at most 10 minutes. the cultivator from the magnificent sect replied. When Xiao Yu heard this, he immediately spread out his divine sense, but after searching for a while, he couldn't find any trace of Linger. Then, he used greater teleportation several times and recalled his 8 black-armored avatars. He then had his avatars search a large area with the Huamin cultivator as the center. But not long after the search began, Xiao Yu was shocked to discover that the space behind him suddenly fluctuated, as if a sage god cultivator had teleported to his side. But if a sage god had teleported, why would they appear directly behind him? Could it be that they were trying to ambush him? However, sage gods generally wouldn't use teleportation to ambush other cultivators. After all, teleportation would cause spatial fluctuations, which would give other cultivators time to react. If they weren't careful, they would be attacked as soon as the teleportation ended. The spatial fluctuations soon ended, and a woman's figure was revealed. Not only was the woman's skin fair, but it was also supple and translucent. There was even a faint fluorescence on her skin. Coupled with the fact that she was wearing a long white gauze dress, she gave off an ethereal, graceful, and peerless feeling. Linger. Xiao Yu lowered his guard and happily walked over. Big brother Xiao. Linger also stepped forward and politely bowed. Xiao Yu was overjoyed. He originally wanted to hug Linger, but he restrained himself. Have you been here all this time? Xiao Yu asked. Yes. Linger nodded and pointed at the Huamin cultivator who had delivered the message. I didn't go far before. When I saw him send the message, I knew that Big Brother Xiao would definitely come looking for me, so I waited here. Linger was still the same as before. Although she had a peerless appearance, she was serious in speech and manner, as if she didn't care about anything. Your ability to hide in space and turn invisible is really amazing. You were hiding right beside me, but I didn't even notice you, Xiao Yu praised. If I didn't have this ability, I'm afraid I would have died in the catastrophe long ago, Linger replied calmly. What realm are you at now? Xiao Yu realized that she couldn't see through Linger's realm, so she asked curiously. His cultivation should only be at the Divine Monarch stage, but if a Saint God stage expert hadn't sealed the space in advance, the Saint God wouldn't have been able to do anything to me, Linger replied. Amazing. Xiao Yu couldn't help but praise her once more. Then, Xiao Yu brought Linger back to the ship, and one last thought in his mind. Xiao Yu and the Huamin's fame could be said to be at its peak. Most of the experts in the God realm knew about the Huamin and the master of the Huamin. Many ordinary cultivators also knew about the Huamin. This made it much easier for Xiao Yu to find her relatives who had ascended to the upper realm. However, under these circumstances, after searching for Anya for so many years, Xiao Yu couldn't help but feel a little worried, so she ordered Guan Yiwei to increase the intensity of the search. After settling Linger down, Xiao Yu once again sent out his 8 clones, and then continued to search old monster Duga's storage ring. To Xiao Yu's disappointment, he didn't find the heavenly sword art that old monster Duga practiced in the storage ring. He guessed that the heavenly sword art had long been memorized by that old monster and wasn't engraved in the jade slip. The narrow god realm was still recovering, and there had been no news of Anya. Although Xiao Yu was anxious, he didn't forget to cultivate. As for cultivation, it was naturally more cost-effective to go to the primal chaos spectrum. After all, 10,000 years in the primal chaos spectrum was only 1 year in the outside world. This undoubtedly increased his cultivation speed by 10,000 times. After entering the primal chaos spectrum, Xiao Yu once again went to the light screen with the words, "All laws are emptiness, born from the heart," written on it. Then he sat cross-legged in front of the light screen and stared at the words, hoping to understand something. Staring at something without blinking for a long time would definitely make an ordinary person's eyes sore and dizzy, but it wasn't a problem for cultivators. Originally, an expert like Xiao Yu wouldn't feel sore and dizzy from staring at something for too long, and he wouldn't even be seeing things. However, after staring at this light screen for 10,000 years, Xiao Yu actually found that his eyes were seeing things. He had been sitting here for 10,000 years, but in reality, only 1 year had passed in the outside world. Otherwise, Xiao Yu wouldn't have had the patience to sit here for so long. It wasn't just his eyes that were seeing things. Perhaps it was because he had been reciting those words in his heart too many times for so many years. But at this moment, even if he didn't recite them, the syllables of those words were constantly reverberating in his mind. At first, Xiao Yu thought that he was tired and needed to rest quickly to recover his consciousness. However, after looking at it for a while, he suddenly found that although he felt that his eyes were seeing things, he could vaguely see some small words on the light screen. Moreover, the voice that was reverberating in his mind seemed to have many more syllables. Thus, he gritted his teeth and persevered for a while longer. As time passed, his eyes became even more blurred. It felt as if a dense fog was rushing into his eyes, but it also felt as if there were countless petals floating on the light screen. The reverberations in his soul also seemed to contain the sound of bells, ancient battle songs, and mysterious incantations. Xiao Yu gradually felt that his vision was being distorted and blinded, and his soul was also heading towards drowsiness. However, he insisted that this was a rare opportunity for him, so he didn't get up and leave. He didn't let himself escape from this strange state. After an unknown period of time, the originally calm scene before Xiao Yu's eyes suddenly became chaotic. The fog surged like a raging tide, and there were also wantonly dancing flower petals. Even the small characters that were becoming clearer and clearer were shining with a dazzling light like stars. In his mind, the sound of bells and battle songs resonated, and the incantations that he couldn't understand at all were deep and vigorous. Xiao Yu was already on the verge of collapsing, and this sudden change in stillness and movement caused him to quickly sink into it. At this point, he actually couldn't think of escaping from this state. His mind was like a piece of cotton, and he could only dance with the wind and go with the flow. Suddenly, the scene in front of his eyes became calm again, and the voice in his soul also became gentler. However, Xiao Yu seemed to be intoxicated. His consciousness was completely submerged, and he couldn't control himself. The scenes that he had seen before, which contained the truths of heaven and earth, the truths of chaos, and the laws of nature, once again appeared in his eyes and mind. Although these scenes were very clear, Xiao Yu, who was already intoxicated, couldn't see them clearly. He even felt that everything that he had understood before was fake. Then, countless illusions appeared, and gradually caused his inner demons to grow. Xiao Yu, who was intoxicated, didn't know that he was now in a very dangerous situation. His realm was about to collapse, and his consciousness would sink forever. Since he didn't know, he naturally wouldn't struggle or react. He could only walk step by step into the bottomless abyss. If it was in the past, Xiao Yu could safely pass through such danger with a grayish-black metal piece protecting his soul, but now he couldn't. However, just as Xiao Yu was about to fall into the abyss, a strange energy fluctuation suddenly erupted from his body, and in an instant he was pulled out of the abyss of death. Xiao Yu's body shook, and his eyes immediately lit up. Everything in front of him disappeared, and there were no more voices in his mind. Everything returned to normal. The light screen in front of him still looked the same, and the surroundings were still hazy. Fortunately, there's still some power left in my soul from Liao Zhou's inheritance, or I'm afraid I'm going to die. Xiao Yu was terrified. He naturally wasn't in the mood to continue comprehending anything. He directly got up and went out of the light door next to the light screen. After leaving the secret room, Xiao Yu first asked Miao Ying how long he had been cultivating, and Miao Ying told him that almost 3,000 years had passed outside. In other words, he had actually sat in front of the light screen for 30 million years, and most of the time, he was in a muddle-headed state. Xiao Yu had just come out of seclusion, and just as he was calmly digesting his harvest, an old man wearing a coarse robe was flying toward the center of the narrow sense of the God realm. The old man's speed was extremely fast, but before he reached the center of the narrow sense of the God realm, he suddenly stopped and changed his direction. After a while, his body landed on the ground. After descending for 100,000 feet, the old man appeared in a pitch-black underground cave. In this underground cave, there was a large net that seemed to be cast from black iron, and there were more than 10 black cocoons on the net. Among those black cocoons, there was one that was obviously much bigger. "You still want to hide in front of me? You really don't know what's good for you." As the old man spoke, he waved his hand and shot out a sword light. The sword light pierced through a stone wall in the cave, and the hard stone wall was easily pierced through like tofu. Screech! After a hissing sound, a huge black spider appeared from the stone wall that the sword light pierced through. However, less than a breath's time after it appeared, countless small holes suddenly appeared on its body, and rays of dazzling sword light shone out from the small holes. In an instant, the black spider's body fell apart. As for the large net and black cocoons, they began to melt rapidly. After the black cocoons melted, skeletons of different shapes and sizes were revealed. Only the largest black cocoon, after melting, revealed a woman with an unharmed figure. Not only was the woman not injured in the slightest, but she was also awake. She held a long sword, and first looked around in surprise, and then stared at the old man with a guarded expression. Why is the merciless sword in your hands?" The old man had a look of surprise, and with a wave of his hand, the long sword in the woman's hand involuntarily flew into his hand. "Little girl, you're quite impressive. You actually used the merciless sword to cultivate a sword-nascent soul." The old man praised again, and then continued, "Not only did you use the merciless sword that I refined to cultivate a sword-nascent soul, you also have my disciple's holy God-sword spirit, and even the great sun's sacred sword that I left for my disciple is hiding in your body. It seems that we are fated to be together. Gold medal, brother, help me up. You must gather $300, okay?" Everyone might not know, but the website's gold medal prize can only be obtained when one reaches $300. Xiao Fei also needs to support her family, so I beg you guys to pity Xiao Fei and help Xiao Fei get that $1,000. Chapter 680. Senior is that ancient sword god who refined the unforgivable divine sword. That girl asked in astonishment. That's right. Even though this unforgivable divine sword is a divine sword, its quality is definitely not inferior to a sacred sword. However, this unforgivable divine sword was refined when I had just broken through to the heaven-connecting realm. Its power cannot be compared to the great sun's sacred sword. Actually, the reason why I refined the great sun's sacred sword is because this old man is slightly dissatisfied with the unforgivable divine sword. Furthermore, the great sun's sacred sword and the unforgivable divine sword are made of similar materials. Other than the difference in quality and power, the two are very similar in other aspects. The old man nodded before asking again. After that disciple of mine was killed, the great sun's sacred sword should have brought his sacred god sword spirit out and escaped. And the great sun's sacred sword should have felt the familiar aura of the unforgivable divine sword, which was why it entered your body. The girl frowned slightly and said, "Senior is right. That time, this junior entered this cave by mistake in order to avoid the calamity. Who would have thought that I would be trapped by the black spider demonic beasts here? If not for this junior having refined the sword-nascent soul and the high quality of the unforgivable divine sword, I would have died here long ago. And when this junior was trapped here, a sword light suddenly pierced into this junior's body one day. After that, this junior discovered that there was an additional sword in my dantian." The old man chuckled and said, "Little girl, you are quite smart. If you had used the unforgivable divine sword to break open the black cocoon with your current cultivation, you would have been easily killed by that black spider. After all, it has the cultivation of an early stage god emperor, and you have not even reached the deity king stage." The girl then said sincerely, "Since the great sun's sacred sword belongs to Senior's disciple, I hope that Senior can take it back." The old man waved his sleeve, causing a sword light to fly out from the girl's body. It then turned into a sword and landed in the hands of the old man. The unforgivable divine sword belongs to this old man too. Little girl, Are you going to return it too? The old man asked with a smile. When the girl heard this, she had a difficult expression. The unforgivable divine sword had already been refined into a sword nascent soul. If she returned the unforgivable divine sword, not only would she be unable to continue cultivating in the future, she might not even be able to live for too long. Senior is an expert that has existed since the primordial era. I'm afraid that you've already reached the peak of the god realm. Naturally, you should take care of us juniors. Just now, Senior said that the unforgivable divine sword is a work that Senior is not very satisfied with. Senior will definitely not mind giving it to Junior. After all, Junior is also a sword cultivator. The woman pondered for a moment and said very calmly, "Haha, little girl, you're really smart." The old man laughed and praised her. Then he asked, "Little girl, what's your name?" The woman cupped her fists and replied, "Junior Anya." The old man continued, "Anya, I've just lost a disciple, and I don't have a successor. Are you willing to become my disciple?" Anya hesitated and said, "I'm afraid I'll disappoint you." The old man shook his head and said, "The path of the sword doesn't care about talent or not. As long as you have patience and perseverance, you'll become a great person sooner or later. My original disciple wasn't someone with excellent aptitude. His comprehension was also very ordinary, but his perseverance was astonishing. Although he died at the hands of others, he was still a saint god when he was alive." Anya naturally knew this, but she still seemed to be a little hesitant. "What? Could it be that you think this old man isn't worthy of being your master?" The old man asked with a dark expression. Anya waved her hand, but didn't say anything. "To tell you the truth, I'm not a generous person. If you don't want to become my disciple, I can only take back the unforgiving sword." The old man first threatened and then tempted. The sword cultivators of this old man all cultivate the Heaven Sword technique, and this Heaven Sword technique has a total of 9 levels. As long as you cultivate to the 7th level, you'll be invincible in the Saint God stage. If you cultivate to the 8th level and combine it with the cultivation of the Heaven Ascension stage, you won't be afraid of any Heaven Ascension stage powerhouses. If you can cultivate to the 9th level, you'll be invincible in the universe, but at least you'll be able to shock everyone. Anya had no other choice. She could only nod and then bow to become his disciple. "Haha, after I avenge your dead senior, I'll bring you to the Heaven Ascension Island to cultivate. At that time, you'll know how lucky it is to have me as your master." The old man seemed to be very happy and then said, "I'll also give you the Great Sun Sacred Sword. When we go back, I'll help you fuse the unforgiving sword with the Great Sun Sacred Sword and refine an even more powerful sacred sword. I'll also help you transfer the sword nascent soul." "Thank you for your guidance, master." Anya still didn't seem to be very interested. The old man didn't care about the attitude of his new disciple. He released his power and wrapped Anya, then continued to fly to the center of the narrow god realm. After Xiao Yu discovered that the primal chaos spectrum had the heaven-defying ability to change the flow of time, he naturally wouldn't let it go to waste. He then invited Qing Xian, Miao Ying, Ling Er, and his disciple Yi Qiu to cultivate. At present, Xiao Yu's friends and family had just made a lot of progress. It was a good time for them to enter the primal chaos spectrum to digest for a while. He didn't enter the primal chaos spectrum again. Instead, he was thinking about how to deal with the danger caused by the light screen with the words, "All laws are void. Appearances are born from the heart." He felt that he had to be able to solve those dangers before he could see the meaning of those words and obtain opportunities or progress. All laws are void. Appearances are born from the heart. Void. It seems that the 9-revolution chaos formula that I'm cultivating must be related to the primal chaos spectrum. Maybe the ancestor who created this technique once had the primal chaos spectrum. After entering it, he created the 9-revolution chaos formula according to the situation in the light screen. This technique progresses step by step. The first few levels are all about building the foundation, so the requirements for the realm are not high. However, after reaching the chaos ethereal enlightenment stage, The requirements for the realm are extremely high. The further you go, the more mysterious the technique becomes. The Chaos Void stage and the Great Enlightenment stage can only be achieved by comprehending for months and years. However, if you spend too much time comprehending the essence of the technique, you will definitely lose a lot of time to cultivate. This is why many seniors are unable to cultivate to the 9 revolution. That's why my cheap master told me not to stay in each realm for too long. If I don't fear the danger brought by the light screen, I should stabilize my realm more and understand the truth of chaos, the truth of heaven and earth, and the laws of nature. I should reach the level of all laws are void. It's too difficult to make all laws are void. After all, appearances are born from the heart. Do I have to empty my heart first? The more Shaolin Yu thought about it, the more headache he felt. He had just sorted out some ideas, but they would soon be messed up by other problems. It seems that I can only take it slow and painstaking. I have to make myself as strong as possible and stabilize my realm as much as possible. I have to make up for the comprehension of realms that I have missed before. I have to face the light screen with a true level of chaos to minimize the danger. Just as Shaolin Yu thought of this, he suddenly narrowed his eyes and looked at the void in the distance. A moment later, the 2 figures had already flown close to the ship. Anya. Shaolin Yu was startled at first. Then he flashed out of the ship. There were 2 people, an old man and a woman, and the woman was Anya. Shaolin Yu definitely recognized her. Husband. Anya clearly recognized Shaolin Yu and immediately called out loudly. The old man frowned and asked Anya, "Disciple, is he your husband?" Anya nodded and said, "Yes." The old man narrowed his eyes and said, "But he is also one of the culprits who killed your senior brother." Anya was shocked and then said, "Master, you're not going to attack your disciple's husband right after taking me in, are you?" The old man sneered and said, "Do you want me to let go of the person who killed my disciple? If you're bullied or killed in the future, won't I avenge you?" Anya insisted, "But he's my husband after all." The old man waved his hand indifferently and said, "You are my disciple now, and your master's orders are more important. After I kill him, I will find a better family for you." The conversation between Anya and the old man fell into Shaolin Yu's ears, and he naturally became nervous immediately. This old man should be Old Monster Dugu's master. Old Monster Dugu was already so powerful. Wouldn't his master be even more abnormal? In addition, Shaolin Yu couldn't see through the old man's cultivation at all, and he couldn't detect the slightest fluctuation of aura from the old man, so he could be sure that the old man was an extremely powerful person. However, what Shaolin Yu didn't expect was that Anya had also become the old man's disciple, and the situation seemed to be slightly more complicated. "Kid, you should kill yourself." The old man looked at Shaolin Yu with a condescending look. Shaolin Yu only smiled and didn't reply. Naturally, it was impossible for him to kill himself, but he quietly let the primal chaos spectrum out of his sea of consciousness. "Don't force me to make a move. I don't like to bully juniors. When you killed my disciple, you should have thought of bearing my anger," the old man said. "Your disciple wasn't a good person. If he didn't force me and wanted to kill me for no reason, how could I deal with him?" Shaolin Yu replied indifferently. "For no reason? He would find trouble with you for no reason." The old man obviously didn't believe him. From these 2 sentences, Shaolin Yu could already determine that this old man didn't know why Old Monster Dugu was killed, and he probably didn't know about the primal chaos spectrum. "Senior, now that my wife is your disciple, we could be considered relatives. Why we have to fight and kill? Wouldn't it be better to sit down and have a few drinks?" Shaolin Yu said with a smile. With the primal chaos spectrum to hide, Shaolin Yu didn't need to be afraid of this unfathomable old man. "Kid, don't try to worm your way into being friends with me. I won't bully you. How about this? If you can take one move from me, I will immediately return to heaven-reaching Saint Island and won't find trouble with you anymore. How about it?" the old man suggested. "Really?" Shaolin Yu's interest was piqued. Chapter 681. Shaolin Yu calmly asked, "I won't move." If Senior can't hit me, does that count as me receiving Senior's attack? How can I not hit you if you stand still? The old man retorted. Does it count? Xiaoling Yu pressed. Yes. The old man gave an affirmative answer after pondering for a moment. Just one move? Xiaoling Yu asked again. Just one move. The old man nodded. All right then. Senior, please make your move. Xiaoling Yu said fearlessly. The old man did not stand on ceremony. Immediately, the aura on his body surged, and the space of the god realm around him began to boil like boiling water. At the same time, Xiaoling Yu felt a divine sense firmly locked onto him. With his current cultivation level, it was impossible for him to escape. Xiaoling Yu summoned the yin-yang mirror, an 8-legged Tai Chi cauldron. He even used the primal chaos true fire to form a defensive barrier around him as he prepared to defend with all his strength. The difference in cultivation level between the two was too great. The old man was also a powerful sword connecting realm sword cultivator. With Xiaoling Yu's current strength, it was impossible for him to block even one move. Xiaoling Yu could also feel that no matter if it was Qi Yu or the golden armored powerhouse known as the Sacred Army, they were not as powerful as this old man. Heaven Sword Art. Annihilation. The old man did not have much time to prepare for this attack. He had just raised his aura when he shouted. In an instant, 8 destructive sword lights appeared and shot towards Xiaoling Yu from all directions. The 8 rays of sword light were over 1 kilometer long and over 30 m wide. As soon as they appeared, they caused numerous cracks that wriggled like bolts of lightning to appear in the surrounding space. And their impetus was vast and mighty. They possessed the might to obliterate the surroundings with a single strike. The 8 unparalleled sword lights locked onto Xiaoling Yu's body under the guidance of the old man's divine sense. Although they were not fast, there was no way for Xiaoling Yu to dodge. Moreover, at this very moment, there was a domain that contained an invisible power that had completely sealed off a large area of the surrounding space. Being able to easily communicate with and use the power of nature was one of the most amazing aspects of an omnipotent expert. This was something the sacred god could not compare to. Cultivators below the connecting heaven stage all relied on their own cultivation base, and magical treasures to fight. But connecting heaven stage powerhouses did not only rely on these, they could also borrow power from nature, from the universe. Therefore, in front of connecting heaven stage powerhouses, cultivators below the connecting heaven stage were often powerless to resist. Therefore, connecting heaven stage powerhouses would gather at connecting heaven Saint Island, because in other places, they simply would not encounter any challenge. The old man was very focused on this attack. After all, this attack was to avenge his disciple. He could not afford to fail. Even if it wasn't for his disciple, he had to kill that brat with this attack. Otherwise, he would lose a lot of face. Sensing the aura and momentum of the 8 sword lights that could destroy everything, Xiaoling Yu knew that even if he used a saint artifact to block them, he would definitely not be able to block them. Therefore, when he saw that the 8 sword lights were about to hit his body, he silently said in his heart, "Primal Chaos Spectrum, take me in." A cruel smile appeared on the old man's face when he saw that his 8 sword lights were about to take the brat's life and completely destroy his body and soul. But soon after, the smile on his face froze. That brat had actually disappeared under the lock of his divine sense. The 8 sword lights fiercely collided at the spot where Xiaoling Yu had been, exploding into a blinding light. Boom! After the light flashed, there was a thunderous explosion. A huge spatial black hole appeared and swept out in all directions. Everything in the vicinity of the black hole was being sucked into the black hole and then disappeared. However, the ship at the Huamin's headquarters remained motionless after a slight tremble. How could a divine spirit treasure be so easily swallowed by a spatial black hole? How is this possible? The space quickly returned to normal. The old man looked around in surprise with his divine sense, but he could not find any trace of the brat. Senior, one move has passed. When the space had completely stabilized, Xiaoling Yu's body appeared again. He was still in the same spot as if he had not moved at all. The old man was even more surprised. Not only did he not see how the brat had disappeared, but he also did not see how he had appeared again. "Brat, do you dare say that you did not move just now?" The old man asked unhappily. "No, definitely not. How could I hide from you whether I moved or not?" Xiao Yu's expression did not change. The old man was indeed fooled, but he naturally would not admit it. Instead, he said, "That move doesn't count. Let's do it again. I don't believe that you could dodge it this time." "Master, you have to keep your promise and set an example for the younger generation." Anya interrupted. "That's right, senior. You can't let us look down on you." Xiao Yu agreed. "Oomph. Don't try to fool me with false reputation. I won't fall for it. Let's do it again. You have to take it whether you want to or not." As soon as he finished speaking, the old man shouted again. 32 sword lights appeared in all directions, and after a slight tremor and sword sound, they shot at Xiao Yu at the same time. Xiao Yu only smiled. When the rays of sword light came close, he hid in the chaos spectrum again. No matter how sharp and powerful the rays of sword light were, they could not hit their target at all. They could only vent their power on the space of the God Realm. The storm soon calmed down. Xiao Yu appeared and asked with a smile, "Senior, do you have anything to say this time?" What Xiao Yu didn't expect was that the old man only snorted coldly, then flicked his sleeves and left without the slightest hesitation. However, the old man took Anya with him. "Brat, when you can stop dodging and really take one of my moves, you can come and take your wife. She will be waiting for you at the heavenly Saint Island." The old man's voice shook the space and entered Xiao Yu's ears. Although Xiao Yu was very angry, he was also very helpless. As soon as he finished speaking, the old man had already disappeared from Xiao Yu's sight and divine sense. Anya is also a sword cultivator. It might not be a bad thing to cultivate with this old man for a while. Who knows, it might not be long before she is not inferior to old Monster Dugu. Xiao Yu could only comfort himself like this. However, at the same time, he secretly decided that he would make a trip to the heavenly Saint Island sooner or later. Although the Skirich Sacred Island was the base of experts and the core of the entire Divine Realm, it was also the most dangerous place in the entire Divine Realm. If one's cultivation hadn't reached the Skirich Realm, one could lose his life at any time in the Skirich Sacred Island where experts gathered. In fact, Xiao Yu did not really want to go to the heavenly Saint Island. He only wanted to gather his friends and family, and then everyone could quietly cultivate and enjoy together. However, sometimes, even if he did not want to do something, he could only brace himself and do it. For example, he had no intention of becoming enemies with old Monster Dugu, but old Monster Dugu still forced him to attack. With the primal chaos spectrum, even if I go to the heavenly Saint Island, there shouldn't be any problems. Even if I can't beat him, at least I can save my life. However, there's no need to be too anxious. Since old Monster Dugu's master has taken Anya as his disciple, he naturally won't hurt her. I wonder if Jiang Lanyue and her sister have arrived at the heavenly Saint Island now. Chi Yu and other experts from Earth are on the heavenly Saint Island. They should take care of me, right? The Sacred Army seems to have a lot of power on the heavenly Saint Island. If they see me, I'm afraid they won't let me have an easy time. After thinking for a while, Xiao Yu returned to the spaceship and continued to cultivate in seclusion. Failing to kill Xiao Yu, old Monster Dugu's master took Anya and did not directly leave the narrow divinity realm. Instead, they went to several places and killed 2 sacred god experts of the demon clan. Back then, Xiao Yu was not the only one who had forced old eccentric Dugu to his death. There were also several Yao clan's holy deities. This eccentric old man could not kill Xiao Yu, but he could kill the Yao clan's holy deities. In any case, he had to vent his anger and give his dead disciple an explanation. It wasn't that the old man would really keep his promise and let Xiao Yu go if he failed to kill him. It was because he couldn't kill Xiao Yu and couldn't break Xiao Yu's divine ability that could be hidden at any time. Therefore, he could only give up. At least he could still maintain the image of a senior who didn't bully his juniors and kept his word. Anyway, he had taken in a new disciple, so the old man's anger at losing his beloved disciple had lessened a lot. The path of cultivation was full of ups and downs. Who could guarantee that one or one's relatives and friends would not die? After venting his anger, the old man took Anya to the heavenly Saint Island. Along the way, he naturally taught her the basics of the heavenly sword technique. Anya felt even more helpless. She had just seen her husband, but he had taken her away right after meeting her husband. She did not even have the chance to greet him. However, this old man was too powerful. She did not want to cause trouble and danger for her husband, so she could only obediently accompany the old man for the time being. At least she could still receive guidance in the way of the sword. Xiao Yu had long known that although he could be said to be invincible in the sacred god realm, there was still a huge gap between him and an Empyrean expert. In front of an Empyrean expert, Xiao Yu's black shell doppelganger, sacred weapon, powerful physical body, primal chaos, primordial fire. These powerful techniques were almost useless. To face an Empyrean expert, I have to reach the 9th transformation stage and have a divine spirit treasure. After thinking for a while, Xiao Yu closed his eyes and began to calm his mind and meditate. In a narrow sense, the god realm was at peace. The Huamin were also on the right track. Although Anya had been taken to the heavenly Saint Island, at least Xiao Yu knew her whereabouts. He knew that she was not in danger now, so he did not have many worries. The main point of his cultivation now was to stabilize his realm and make up for what he owed during the primal chaos mystic enlightening and primal chaos void phase. Although he owed a lot, fortunately, cultivating in the primal chaos spectrum would shorten his cultivation time by 10,000 times. Moreover, with the help of the 2 light screens, he did not have to waste too much time. After spending 100 million years in the primal chaos spectrum, 10,000 years in the outside world, Xiao Yu finally ended his cultivation. Chapter 682. With the help of the 2 light curtains, Xiao Yu had already made up for what he owed in the past 100 million years of cultivation in the primal chaos spectrum. At the very least, Xiao Yu had grasped all the features of the Chaos Tongxian stage and Chaos Void Form stage, as well as some of the truths of nature, natural laws, and chaos that should be understood in these 2 stages. Everything was clear to him. As for the Chaos Enlightenment stage, he estimated that he could only progress further after successfully passing the test of the 8 words light screen. This time, facing the 8 words light screen, he encountered the same situation as before. After looking at it for a long time, his eyes would become blurry, and battle songs and incantations would reverberate in the depths of his soul. However, Xiao Yu's consciousness did not sink as easily as last time. After persisting for many years, Xiao Yu still could not withstand it. However, since he no longer had any flaws in his cultivation, he could easily break free from it. After closing his eyes and resting for a while, he looked at the 8 words light screen again. He still could not persist to the end, but the time he persisted was much longer than last time. After repeating this hundreds of times and spending nearly 10 million years, Xiao Yu finally made it to the end. The battle song stopped, the incantations no longer reverberated, and the confusion in his eyes had also disappeared. The 8 words on the 8 words light screen had disappeared, and instead, there were rows of small words. Man follows earth, earth follows heaven, heaven follows Tao, Tao follows nature. There are thousands of Taoists, but all paths lead to the same destination. Only the true self can be cultivated. Cultivating all methods means that all methods return to one. In the end, all methods are empty, and there is only the true self. All forms are formed by the heart. Turn a blind eye, here, but not here. There is only the true self in the heart. All forms are formed and destroyed according to the heart. When the true self is cultivated, it forms its own circle. With one's body as heaven and earth, it gives birth to chaos. This is the chaos enlightenment. Although the small words were clear, Xiao Yu could not see them clearly. It was as if he was reading a heavenly book. However, even though Xiao Yu could not understand them, He knew that every word was true. If he could comprehend the meaning contained in these small words, he should be able to achieve perfection in the chaos enlightenment stage, and then have the capital to break through to the ninth transformation stage. Those small words only appeared for less than 100 breaths of time before they began to dissipate rapidly. Xiao Yu hurriedly memorized all the contents. When all the small words disappeared, only the words, "All things are empty," born from the heart, were left on the light screen. Xiao Yu could guess that the light curtain here did not appear because of the 9 revolutions chaos mantra, nor was it formed specifically to assist in the cultivation of the 9 revolutions chaos mantra. The essence contained in the light curtain and the effects it could exert were of great benefit to all cultivators. It was beneficial to any cultivator's cultivation. Xiao Yu's ancestors should have created the 9 revolutions chaos mantra through the essence of the light curtain. If other cultivators came, such as a sword expert with extremely high comprehension came, they would definitely create a set of powerful sword techniques through the light curtain. It was impossible to understand the meaning of the small words that appeared on the light curtain all at once. Xiao Yu still needed to carefully study the words one by one in the future. However, just by memorizing all the contents of the small words, Xiao Yu felt that he had taken a big step forward in the Chaos Enlightenment stage and was about to advance to the late stage of the Chaos Enlightenment stage. However, even if he reached the late stage, it was better to achieve perfection at the peak of the late stage. Many ancestors were unable to cultivate to the 9 revolutions chaos mantra. No matter how lucky Xiao Yu was, he had to be fully prepared. Otherwise, if he failed to break through to the 9 revolutions chaos mantra, everything he had obtained would disappear and all his previous efforts would be in vain. Qing Xian, Miao Ying, Ling and other Xiao Yu's relatives and friends, after entering the chaos spectrum, in addition to strengthening their own cultivation methods, naturally also went to the first 2 light curtains to seek opportunities and breakthroughs under Xiao Yu's guidance. They all had some gains. Blindly cultivating was not a good thing, and it was also very boring. After Xiao Yu read the contents of the small words a few times, he came out of the chaos spectrum. Many years had passed in the chaos spectrum, but not many days had passed in the outside world. The narrow divine realm was still gradually recovering, and the Huamen were also slowly developing. Everything was very calm outside. After walking around outside, Xiao Yu tried to get close to nature, understand nature, and feel the world of the universe. Then, he entered the chaos spectrum again to meditate and cultivate. When he was bored or tired of cultivating, he came out of the chaos spectrum to take a breath of fresh air. Occasionally, he would take Miao Ying and the others out to play. His days were very comfortable. In the blink of an eye, more than 1,000,000 years had passed. Excluding the time spent playing outside, Xiao Yu and his relatives and friends had actually cultivated for a full 10 billion years. 10 billion years of cultivation was already very long. It was enough for an ordinary cultivator to cultivate from the foundation establishment stage in the cultivation world to the holy God stage in the divine realm. However, 1,000,000 years was just a snap of the fingers for many experts in the divine realm. Miao Ying, Qing Xian, and even Ling were now very stable in the holy God stage. The disadvantage of their rapid cultivation had long been made up for. And today, Xiao Yu received another piece of news from Guan Yiwei, who had just ascended to the divine emperor stage. That was the devourer of heaven, who had originally become the dragon emperor in the demon realm, had also ascended to the divine realm. He had already been received by the dragons to the dragon's residence. Since he had nothing to do, Xiao Yu brought his relatives and friends to the dragon's residence in the narrow divine realm. The dragons naturally knew of Xiao Yu's fame, so they received Xiao Yu and the others very politely. Naturally, they would not stop Xiao Yu from meeting the devourer of heaven. The devourer of heaven still had the appearance of a handsome young man, but after being the dragon emperor for so many years, he appeared to be a lot more mature and no longer had a thieving expression. Even in front of Xiao Yu, the current devourer of heaven was the same. Although he had a respectful expression, he rarely smiled and gave off a cool feeling. Are you coming with me, or are you going to continue to stay in the dragon's residence? Xiao Yu asked the Devourer of Heaven. The reason why I am where I am today is all thanks to Master. Naturally, I will follow Master, the Devourer of Heaven replied respectfully. I've already said that we are friends, not master and servant. Xiao Yu shook his head and laughed. If I were still the Dragon Emperor, for the sake of the dragon's reputation, I would be able to get along with Master as a friend. But now, I am no longer the Dragon Emperor. Naturally, you are still my master. Please do not doubt my loyalty. The Devourer of Heaven looked very serious. The current you is not fun at all. Xiao Yu replied non-committally, then left the dragon's residence with the Devourer of Heaven and his relatives and friends. From beginning to end, the dragon's experts were smiling at the side. They did not raise the slightest objection to Xiao Yu taking the Devourer of Heaven away. Even after Xiao Yu left, they were secretly relieved and secretly relieved. In the narrow sense of the God realm, even a transcendent existence like the Dragon Clan was extremely fearful of Xiao Yu, the god of death. After leaving the dragon's residence, Xiao Yu said to the Devourer of Heaven, "You have just ascended and your cultivation is too low. You need to find a place to cultivate for a period of time. Master must have prepared a good spirit beast pouch for me. Just let me go in. Anyway, I'm already used to staying in the spirit beast pouch all day long." The Devourer of Heaven was very cooperative. Xiao Yu felt that this guy was becoming more and more annoying. He smiled bitterly and said, "This time, you don't have to go into the spirit beast pouch. It is a very good place. We usually cultivate there." After saying that, Xiao Yu led everyone into the Chaos Spectrum and explained the situation in the Chaos Spectrum to the Devourer of Heaven. This place is not bad. After listening to Xiao Yu and the others' explanation, the Devourer of Heaven's expression did not change much. His tone was very calm. He continued to say, "Don't worry, it won't be long before I catch up with you." Xiao Yu was already used to the fact that his friends and family were not surprised after seeing the Chaos Spectrum. These guys had blind faith in him. No matter what happened to him or what treasures he had, these guys would not be too surprised. When will my brother, Gu Yunfei, ascend? After settling the Devourer of Heaven, Xiao Yu asked Ling. His talent is average. Even with the help of the Huan Min's countless cultivation resources, I don't know when he will be able to ascend, Ling replied. Don't worry, husband. Although Gu Yunfei's talent is average, the Huan Min are strong. He can continue to cultivate steadily. Sooner or later, he will be able to undergo the divine tribulation. Moreover, the Huan Min have many top-grade defensive artifacts. He won't be in danger during the divine tribulation, Qing Xian comforted. When he ascends, the Huan Min will have spread their tentacles all over the narrow God realm. He will be found very quickly, Miao Ing added. In the future, more and more disciples of the Huan Min will ascend. They will also report the situation of the Huan Min in the immortal realm, Ling added. Xiao Yu did not think too much about it. After returning to the ship, he continued to cultivate and understand the meaning of the small words. Not only did he cultivate, but he also used the primal chaos true fire to refine the 8-legged Tai Chi cauldron and the chair magic treasure. Before going to heaven reaching Saint Island, Xiao Yu had a few things to do. First, he had to refine the chair magic treasure. Second, he had to let the Huan Min have more Sheng God experts. Third, he had to reach the great circle of the primal chaos grand enlightenment realm. Two of these things required Xiao Yu's hard work. Xiao Yu also had a way to let the Huan Min have more Sheng gods. He found a few talented and loyal cultivators from the Huan Min and brought them into the primal chaos scroll to cultivate. Naturally, some of them could quickly become Sheng gods. After all, 1,000,000 years in the outside world was 10 billion years in the primal chaos scroll. However, after another 100,000 years, the Huan Min had already nurtured 2 Sheng gods. Xiao Yu not only failed to refine the chair magic treasure, he also failed to reach the great circle of the primal chaos grand enlightenment realm. On the other hand, Xiaoling Yu had already lost his patience. He felt that going to Heavenly Saint Island and seeing more experts would be beneficial for him in breaking through his bottleneck. Chapter 683. Xiaoling Yu had already obtained a route to Tongtian's sacred island. Although it was a long journey, it wouldn't take much time if he continuously used the tubular sacred tool to perform greater teleportation. It would take Qi Yu 100,000 years to travel from the Heavenly Saint Island to the narrow divine world, but he was referring to flying by himself. Although he was a heavenly saint, his speed was not comparable to the great teleportation of the tubular saint tool. The tubular sacred tool's greater teleportation could cross the territories of countless races in a single breath. It was impossible for a divine master to do that. Xiaoling Yu wasn't in a hurry to go to Tongtian's sacred island. The divine world was vast and boundless with countless races. Naturally, he wanted to experience it with his friends and family. While enjoying the scenery, he naturally didn't forget to take a stroll in some big cities to collect some treasures of different races and high-quality cultivation resources. Along the way, he would stop to cultivate when he had some enlightenment. Naturally, the time dragged on for a long time. Fortunately, he had friends and family with him. Moreover, the environment of the different races in the divine world was different. He didn't feel bored. On the contrary, because he had seen more, his state of mind gradually became peaceful and perfect. Every time he stopped at a place, Xiaoling Yu would first collect a high-grade map jade slip. Then, he would check if there were any new races or places nearby. After leaving the narrow divine world for 100,000 years, Xiaoling Yu stopped again after a great teleportation. Then, he flew towards a big city. After purchasing a map jade slip in the big city, he asked Linger to come out of the Primal Chaos catalog. Then, he teleported towards the north of the big city. After the teleportation, Xiaoling Yu and Linger arrived at the territory of a race called the Devouring Soul. The Devouring Soul race was a special and powerful race. They specialized in devouring all kinds of spirit race and spiritual items to cultivate. Not only was their race huge, but their cultivators' cultivation speed was also much faster than other races. In order to find all kinds of spirit race and spiritual items, the cultivators of the Devouring Soul race would often invade places far away. Because of the constant fighting, the battle strength of their race had always been maintained at an extremely high level. Naturally, there were no spirit clans living near the Devouring Soul race. Even spirit channeling items were rare. Only by frequently going on expeditions and cultivating spirit creatures in their own territory could they continue to develop. Since the Devouring Soul clan only targeted the spirit clans and spirit channeling items, they did not offend the other clans nearby. In addition, they were very strong, so the nearby clans did not dare to provoke them. However, the God Emperor Hollow Spirits of God Emperor experts and the Saint God True Spirits of Saint God experts were the favorite supplements of the Devouring Soul clan. They would never let go of any foreign race experts who trespassed into their territory. The Devouring Soul race was proficient in many spells and divine abilities that could devour spiritual beings. Even if a God Emperor or a Saint God expert didn't self-detonate, they could still forcibly extract a God Emperor's hollow spirit or a Saint God's true spirit from the enemy's body. Now that we're in the territory of the Devouring Soul clan, you'll be able to replenish your energy. After so many years of cultivation in the Chaos Spectrum, your cultivation realm has improved the most. You can't fall behind in terms of cultivation power, Xiaoling Yu said to Ling with a smile. Ling only nodded silently and did not say anything. Since almost none of the experts from the nearby clans dared to enter the Devouring Soul clan's territory, the map didn't have any detailed markings of the Devouring Soul clan's territory. Xiaoling Yu and Ling could only wander around aimlessly, looking for the gathering place of the Devouring Soul clan's experts. The weaker cultivators of the Devouring Soul clan naturally did not catch Xiaoling Yu and Ling's attention. They could only move forward at high speed. It took them a full 300 years to determine the core area of the Devouring Soul clan. The Devouring Soul clan was different from the other clans. Their unique characteristics dictated that they must be united. Even in their own territory, most of their experts would gather together. When it was time to attack, all the experts in the clan who could move would attack. The cultivation resources in the Devouring Soul clan's territory were very scarce. Only the place where the experts of the Devouring Soul clan gathered, the core area of the Devouring Soul clan, was slightly better. Not only did the core area forbid foreign cultivators from entering, even ordinary cultivators of the clan would find it difficult to enter. It was a lush forest with many tall mountains and great rivers. The dense forest made it so that there were no roads. It also provided the cultivators from the Devouring Soul clan who were adept at concealment a great environment for concealment. The Devouring Soul clan could be considered the natural nemesis of all spirit clans. The devouring power they released could mess up the spirituality of all spirit clans' cultivators, greatly reducing their combat power. However, the Devouring Soul clan had another strong point, which was that they were very good at concealing themselves. Whether they were hiding in the shade of trees, rocks, or bushes, it was very difficult for ordinary cultivators to discover them with their divine sense. Naturally, there were countless experts of the Devouring Soul clan hidden in this forest in the core area of the Devouring Soul clan. They were constantly watching every corner of the forest. Once they discovered that an enemy had sneaked in, they would attack together. However, although the cultivators of the Devouring Soul clan who were in charge of concealing themselves were very good at concealing themselves, they were not worth mentioning in front of Xiao Yu and Ling Er. After Xiao Yu and Ling arrived in this forest, they did not move very quickly. All the Devouring Soul clan sentries along the way were easily knocked unconscious by them. After a month of this, Xiao Yu and Ling Er silently entered the deepest part of the forest and arrived in front of a huge canyon. It was unknown how long this canyon was. It was about a few hundred feet wide at the top and widened as one went down. On both sides of the canyon, there were many Devouring Soul clan sentries. Even Xiao Yu found it difficult to enter silently. After all, there were many God Emperor experts of the Devouring Soul clan among the sentries. There must be some spiritual items or imprisoned experts of the Devouring Soul clan in this canyon. Let's just charge indirectly. As Xiao Yu spoke, she sped up with Ling Er and entered the canyon in an instant. Immediately, the Devouring Soul clan's cultivators in the vicinity sounded alarms. Countless Devouring Soul clan's cultivators swarmed over like a tide. I'll attract their attention. You go in and look for an opportunity. Xiao Yu did not conceal her aura as she spoke to Ling Er. Ling Er did not stand on ceremony. With a sway of her body, she disappeared. When Ling Er was at the God Monarch stage, even Xiao Yu found it difficult to discover her when she was invisible. Now that she was at the Saint God stage, as long as she was not attacked by a powerful force or entered a powerful array or restriction by mistake, no Saint God could discover her. Firstly, Ling Er's concealment technique was too profound. Secondly, Xiao Yu's movements were too big. Naturally, all the Devouring Soul clan's experts in the canyon were gathered here. The Devouring Soul clan's overall strength was very strong. There were close to 20 Saint Gods in the clan. Even if some of them were out or in closed-door cultivation, there were still 12 Saint Gods who rushed over after receiving the warning. In addition, there were thousands of God Emperor stage Devouring Soul clan's experts besieging them. Even Xiao Yu had to be careful. If not for the fact that the Devouring Soul clan was too strong, Xiao Yu and Ling would not have to be so careful. They could just charge in and snatch whatever they could. There were too many of them. Furthermore, they were determined to protect their homeland. If Xiao Yu fought them head-on, it was inevitable that he would be injured. Even if he could remain unharmed, his avatars would be in danger. Therefore, he had to drag the Devouring Soul clan's experts back as he fought. He would not give the Saint Gods a chance to surround him. However, in order to attract all the Saint Gods over, Xiao Yu had to give them some pressure. Thus, he brought out the yin-yang mirror, allowing the 4 illusory monsters that were not afraid of any attacks to attack. He and the 8 black armored avatars just had to defend. It didn't take long for the other side to send out 3 more Saint God stage experts, 15 Saint God spirit-devouring experts, thousands of God emperors, and countless God kings spirit-devouring experts. This lineup was probably something that only heaven-reaching experts could take on. Xiao Yu immediately felt a huge pressure. In order to buy more time for Ling and ensure that he would not be surrounded, Xiao Yu also brought out Qing Xian, Miao Ying, and Fudi. As for Lil Bing, she was naturally in Qing Xian's arms. Suddenly, there were 4 more Saint Gods. Even if they deliberately held back their strength, they could still balance the situation. The Devouring Soul clan was able to become the strongest clan in the God world. They naturally had a way to deal with the invasion of strong enemies. Seeing that they could not take down the enemy after so long, and that the enemy had no intention of retreating, the 15 Saint Gods immediately gathered together and opened their mouths. Waves of devouring power were released from the mouths of the 15 Saint Gods. In an instant, it formed a devouring hurricane that swept towards Xiao Yu. The spirit, devouring God emperors and God kings in all directions also opened their mouths. Originally, the devouring power was an invisible force. However, at this moment, it rapidly gathered together, causing the devouring hurricane to become stronger and stronger. In the vast and boundless God world, there were too many unique clans. Even though Xiao Yu was said to be invincible under the omnipotent realm, it did not mean that he could go to any region in the God world other than the omnipotent Saint Island. In such a vast God world, there were definitely many mysterious things. No matter whether it was the combined domains of the 8 black carapace doppelgangers, the 4 symbols domain, or the dual chaotic domains, they did not have any effect on the devouring power. Under the hurricane formed by the devouring power, Xiao Yu felt his spirituality become chaotic. He could not suppress his qi and blood, and his life essence showed signs of being sucked out of his body. Even his soul and chaotic divine infant were trembling. If Xiao Yu was already in such a state, Qing Xian, Miao Ying, Fudi, Lil Bing, and the 8 black carapace doppelgangers were naturally in a worse state. Only the 4 phantom monsters were not affected at all. Under such circumstances, Xiao Yu could only bring everyone into the chaotic spectrum to hide temporarily. The sudden disappearance of the enemy made the Devouring Soul clan's experts very confused and surprised. They sealed off a large area of the surrounding space and carefully searched. Today's update is a little late. Everyone, please forgive me. The 3rd update will not be missed. Don't worry. Chapter 684. The experts of the Devouring Soul clan naturally couldn't find Xiao Yu's hiding spot, but they still carefully sealed off the battlefield. For hours later, an earth-shaking explosion suddenly erupted from the depths of the canyon, causing the entire canyon to shake. The experts of the Devouring Soul clan, who were still sealing off the battlefield, all paled. A few Saint Gods left the battlefield and rushed into the depths of the canyon. Following that, the devouring power also disappeared. At that moment, Xiao Yu led the experts from the primal chaos spectrum and charged out. They launched their strongest attacks at the Devouring Soul's cultivators in all directions. The Devouring Soul clan cultivators originally thought that the enemy had escaped or snuck into the depths of the canyon to create the huge commotion. They didn't expect the enemy to still be on the battlefield. So many Devouring Soul clan cultivators couldn't avoid the sudden attack. Large swaths of Devouring Soul clan cultivators were killed on the spot. 2 Saint God experts were even seriously injured by the primal chaos eel that had fused with the illusory sky forbidden formation. The Saint Gods who had just left were in a dilemma. They didn't know if they should go back to the clan to check on the situation or stay behind to deal with the enemy. Xiao Yu's continuous attacks forced the Saint Gods who were about to leave to turn back. When they gathered again and unleashed the suction force, Xiao Yu led the experts from the Devouring Soul clan into the primal chaos spectrum again. In the depths of the Grand Canyon, there were constantly large movements. However, just as these spirit-devouring holy gods wanted to investigate, the strong enemies here would appear, giving them a headache. They could only send a holy god to investigate in the depths of the Grand Canyon. Ling wouldn't have a problem even if there was one more saint god. So Xiao Yu patiently hid in the primal chaos spectrum. As long as the enemy sent more saint gods away, Xiao Yu would follow and give them a heavy blow. The stalemate lasted for nearly 20 hours. Ling suddenly appeared in the midst of the enemy experts and sent a saint god flying with a palm strike, throwing the enemy formation into chaos. The suction force also paused for a moment, and Xiao Yu quickly moved to meet up with Ling, fleeing out of the canyon. Xiao Yu had been left behind in the canyon to protect Ling. Now that he was determined to escape, with the four fearless monsters covering their backs, the enemy would not be able to stop them. After flying out of the canyon, Xiao Yu first put the experts on her side into the chaos spectrum. Then, she used the tube-shaped saint weapon to activate greater teleportation. In an instant, she was far away from the devouring Soul Clan's territory. "How's the harvest?" Xiao Yu asked Ling. "Not bad. I think it won't be long before I reach the peak of the late-stage Holy God stage," Ling said calmly. "That's a good harvest," Xiao Yu said with a smile. Miao Ying and Qing Xian were a little surprised and envious. Ling was only at the early stage Holy God stage. He could quickly reach the peak of the late-stage Holy God stage just by looting the devouring Soul Clan. The harvest was definitely unimaginable. "Don't look at me like that. There's still a long way to go. You still have a chance." Seeing Miao Ying and Qing Xian looking at her meaningfully, Xiao Yu said with a headache. Hearing Xiao Yu's words that sounded like a promise, Miao Ying and Qing Xian regained their cheerful expressions. "There's something here that I can't see through, but it doesn't seem to be useful to me." As Ling spoke, he took out a black bead. The bead was the size of a date. It was oval-shaped and had a red vertical line in the center. The center of the vertical line was slightly wider. It looked very strange. After throwing the black bead to Xiao Yu, Ling went into seclusion to cultivate. "I can feel an evil aura from this bead," said Miao Ying. "It looks like an eyeball," said Qing Xian. Xiao Yu first used his soul consciousness to probe the bead. He was surprised to find that his soul consciousness disappeared as soon as it touched the bead. He poured his primal chaos divine power into the bead, but it didn't change even after he poured 30% of his power into it. Xiao Yu squeezed the bead with his hand. The hardness of the bead made him speechless. He squeezed it until his hand hurt, but the bead didn't change at all. It didn't even show any signs of deformation, let alone cracking. It should be known that the quality of Xiao Yu's hand wasn't lower than an ordinary holy artifact. He burned it with the primal chaos true fire, but it didn't change in a short time. "Why do I feel a little dizzy?" Qing Xian, who had been staring at the bead, suddenly trembled. He touched his forehead and said, "Me too," said Miao Ying with a frown. Xiao Yu's thick eyebrows, which were as straight as swords, were also knitted together. He stared at the round bead for nearly 2 hours and also felt dizzy. "This thing is a little strange," said Xiao Yu. "Try dripping a drop of blood essence on it and see if it absorbs it," suggested Qing Xian. "It's better not to act rashly. This thing is not simple. It's definitely not an ordinary treasure. If you use it carelessly, you might suffer a backlash and be in danger." Miao Ying was calmer. She didn't agree with Qing Xian's suggestion. "Since it can absorb my power and soul consciousness, I'll let it absorb as much as it wants. Let's see if it's full," said Xiao Yu after pondering for a moment. During the rest of the journey, Xiao Yu would pour 30% of his power into the bead every once in a while. After it recovered, he would continue to pour it in. Occasionally, Xiao Yu would also pour some of his soul consciousness and blood essence into the bead. He persisted like this for nearly 10,000 years before the bead finally changed. The red vertical line in the center of the bead became slightly wider. Xiao Yu also discovered another change. In the past, he would have to stare at the bead for 4 hours before he felt dizzy. Now, he only felt dizzy for 3 hours. Since there was a change, Xiaoling Yu had even more reason to persist. In any case, he was very careful every time he poured energy into the bead. At most, he only used 30% of his power and less than a tenth of his soul consciousness and blood essence. It didn't affect his overall strength too much. Another few hundred years later, Xiaoling Yu forced his way into the forbidden grounds of a race called the Ice Snow Race. First, he used his strength to break through the layers of restrictions and formations, and he stole an ice snow flower. Then he forced his way out of the encirclement of 8 saint gods from the Ice Snow Race. It had to be said that the icebound domain set up by the 8 saint gods had caused quite a bit of trouble for Xiaoling Yu. If he hadn't released the white flames of the 8-legged Tai Chi cauldron, he might not have been able to break free from the Ice Snow Race so easily. If you use this ice snow flower wisely, I'm sure you'll improve quite a bit. For it, your husband has risked his life. You have to find some time to compensate your husband, Xiaoling Yu said with a mischievous smile as he handed the ice snow flower to Qing Xian. Another 2,000 years passed since he left the Ice Snow Race. Xiaoling Yu stopped on his journey to the Skylink Saint Island once again. He barged into the sacred shrine of a race called the demonic blood snake toad and stole a vial of extremely high-quality demonic blood that had been sealed by countless restrictions from the altar. Xiaoling Yu had almost lost his life after barging into the sacred shrine of the demonic blood snake toad because the demonic blood snake toad prophet who watched over the shrine was extremely powerful. The prophet was not an expert of the Skylink Saint God realm, but he was still at the peak of late Saint God. At the same time, his abilities were extremely strange. Even if he was struck by Xiaoling Yu, he would immediately turn into a clump of demonic blood and return to his original form. He would not be injured at all. Most importantly, the prophet seemed to have one foot in the Skylink realm. He was able to borrow the demonic energy that the demonic blood snake toad clan had scattered across the land for countless years. He was also able to use the power of the remnant souls of the ancestors that were originally sealed in the shrine. Unless an expert of the Skylink realm charged in personally, the prophet was practically invincible within the shrine. Xiaoling Yu could only hide in the primal chaos spectrum after encountering danger several times. However, the prophet was extremely focused. As soon as Xiaoling Yu came out, he would be attacked. Unfortunately, Xiaoling Yu was inside the primal chaos spectrum and could not move it. He could only charge in again and again. After suffering heavy injuries and nearly collapsing 8 of his clones, Xiaoling Yu finally managed to enter the shrine as he wished. Of course, if the prophet was not in the shrine and could not borrow the power of the ancestors of the demonic blood snake toad clan, even if he had one foot in the Skylink realm, Xiaoling Yu would still be able to defeat him. This also proved that the realm of the gods was vast, and there were countless experts. Under special circumstances, Xiaoling Yu might not be an invincible existence under the Skylink realm. After giving the bottle of demonic blood to Miao Ying, Xiaoling Yu no longer had the mood to tease his wife. He immediately looked for a secluded place to recuperate. After recuperating in the primal chaos spectrum for nearly 100,000 years, the heavily injured Xiaoling Yu finally recovered. However, only 10 years had passed in the outside world, and now Xiaoling Yu was still halfway to the Skylink Sacred Island. With a lesson learned from the shrine, Xiaoling Yu did not dare to rashly charge into the forbidden areas of the foreign races or the places where experts gathered. He obediently headed towards the Skylink Sacred Island. After hurrying on for another few thousand years, Xiaoling Yu had no choice but to stop again. After using greater teleportation this time, the tubular saint artifact actually brought him to a battlefield. There were actually dozens of saint gods fighting fiercely on the battlefield. They released their auras and domains with all their strength, completely sealing the space around the battlefield. The entire space was constantly fragmenting. The tubular saint artifact could not use greater teleportation in such a situation unless Xiaoling Yu wanted to be trapped in the spatial turbulence. The sudden appearance of the tubular saint artifact naturally attracted the attention of all the experts on both sides. Neither side knew where the tubular saint artifact came from, but they were certain that it was not their side's reinforcements. Both sides believed that it was an enemy's artifact, so they bombarded the tubular saint artifact with attacks. In an instant, more than 30 saint gods attacked. Even Shaolin Yu could only hide in the tubular saint artifact, not daring to come out. The attacks came from all directions. Although the tubular saint artifact constantly trembled, its position did not change much. Using the tubular saint artifact for greater teleportation all year round was inevitable. Special thanks to Charles Zhaoqi for the 8,888 red packets. Chapter 685. Before the second wave of attacks arrived, Shaolin Yu put away the tube-shaped saint artifact and hid in the primal chaos spectrum. The two sides were stunned by the sudden disappearance of Shaolin Yu and the tube-shaped saint artifact, but they soon resumed their respective battles. Shaolin Yu's sudden arrival and departure did not affect the two sides, and their battle was still in full swing. In front of a light gate in the primal chaos spectrum, Shaolin Yu could see the situation outside. The battle outside should be between the two races. Below the Saint God Expert's battlefield, the armies of the two races were still fiercely clashing. Seeing that the armies of the two races were like a vast ocean, Shaolin Yu knew that the scale of this battle was very vast. It seemed that the two races would not rest until one of them was dead. The sacred gods of the two sides did not engage in close combat. Instead, they gathered together and constantly bombarded each other. The scene looked rather spectacular, but in reality, their attacks were unable to achieve any substantial effect. It was very difficult for them to cause any damage to their opponents, who had equally strong defenses. The battle between the Saint God Stage experts was neither hot nor cold, but Shaolin Yu was actually very anxious. This was because after using the Great Teleportation, he was able to hear the battle between the Saint God Stage experts of the two clans. This was also the place where the two clans were constantly bombarding each other. The space here had always been in a fragmented state. Of course, both sides would definitely be very cautious in such a great battle. Although taking a step forward would allow one's attacks to get closer to the enemy, it would also allow the enemy's attacks to get closer to oneself. Shaolin Yu gradually calmed down and quietly waited for the battle to end or for the two groups of sacred gods to change their battlefield. It was impossible for such a battle to continue for long. Even the sacred god could not keep attacking without stopping. In less than half a day, the battle between the two groups of saint gods had yet to come to an end, but the battle below had already tilted in favor of one side. One side began to show signs of defeat, causing them to retreat en masse. The side that had gained the upper hand took advantage of the situation and continued to advance. Since the outcome of the battle below had already been decided, the defeated side could only hope that the sacred gods could win. Their sacred gods did not continue to be in a stalemate with the other side. They collectively advanced several hundred feet to increase the pressure on the other side. However, the other side increased their defensive strength. While using a golden light barrier to resist, they no longer attacked with their cultivation energy and instead threw exploding balls into the battlefield. The side that was anxious to reverse the situation had no choice but to give up the initiative after several of their sacred gods were injured. They returned to their original position, but they sent two sacred gods to the battlefield on the ground. Both sides had more than 20 sacred gods. Losing two sacred gods would not affect the overall strength of the sacred god camp too much, but if these two sacred gods joined the battle on the ground, they would be able to play a huge role. However, the side that had already gained the upper hand on the ground very quickly sent two saint gods down. As a result, both sides continued to send holy deities to the battlefield on the ground. The scene of holy deities fighting in groups naturally ceased to exist, and the holy deities began to fight on the ground. The shattered space was quickly restored, and Shaolin Yu was able to walk out of the primal chaos spectrum. Shaolin Yu discovered that the battlefield was on a small island. Almost half of the island was occupied by the armies of the two races. What was strange was that at this moment, There were actually hurricanes whistling from all directions of the sea. The hurricanes swept up monstrous waves, violently slamming against the shores of the island. It was a spectacular sight. Logically speaking, the winds should only come from one direction. Only one side of the island should be hit by the waves. The situation on the island was a little strange. Although Xiao Lingyu was curious, he was also very rational. He did not want to cause any more trouble before going to Heavenly Saint Island. He immediately summoned his Tubular Saint artifact. Just as he was about to use greater teleportation, a large mountain at the center of the island suddenly collapsed. Then, a huge vortex appeared. The vortex was pitch black. As soon as it appeared, it sucked in everything around it. It was like the mouth of a demonic beast that could devour everything. To Xiao Lingyu's horror, although he had ordered the Tubular Saint artifact to use greater teleportation, it was constantly trembling and began to move towards the black vortex. Beside the black vortex, the armies of the two races that were fighting fiercely were all sucked into the vortex. Even the primal chaos experts of the two races were no exception. The Tubular Saint artifact only lasted for less than 10 breaths of time before it was sucked into the black vortex. Xiao Lingyu was prepared to use greater teleportation. Naturally, he was inside the Tubular Saint artifact, so he was also pulled into the black vortex. Xiao Lingyu could not help but feel a little regretful. If he had known that there would be such an unforeseen event, he would have waited a little longer in the primal chaos spectrum. Presumably, the primal chaos spectrum would not be swallowed by the vortex. Just as the Tubular Saint artifact was swallowed up by the black vortex, a short, thin old man with a withered face appeared beside the vortex. Even the Saint artifact was unable to resist the suction force, yet he was able to stand there without moving at all. It was a testament to his strength. He stared at the black vortex for a moment, and then he flew in without hesitation. The Tubular Saint artifact spun at high speed in the black vortex. After 20 breaths of time, it suddenly stopped. Xiao Lingyu did not look at the situation outside. He immediately put away the Tubular Saint artifact and hid in the primal chaos spectrum. No matter what, safety first. In front of a door of light, Xiao Lingyu looked at the situation outside. Outside was a scene of devastation. It was a scene of broken mountains and rivers. Xiao Lingyu looked around, but he could not find the vortex that pulled the Tubular Saint artifact in. In other words, there should be no way out nearby. Xiao Lingyu, who was often in danger, was not in a hurry to go out. He was still waiting in the primal chaos spectrum. The countless cultivators from the two clans who were sucked in first were nearby. However, they did not fight to the death. Instead, they immediately scattered in all directions. It seems that they knew about this place. The battle from before was probably for the sake of coming in. In order to prevent the other party from coming in, there's most likely a treasure here. Xiao Lingyu could guess the situation from the reactions of the cultivators from the two clans. Not long after, the skinny old man who came in last also entered Xiao Lingyu's line of sight. The reason why he noticed this old man was because this old man's appearance and appearance were clearly similar to the cultivators of the human clan. He was completely different from the cultivators of the two clans. Moreover, although the old man's face was malicious and gloomy, he looked very calm. After entering, he did not panic, nor was he in a hurry to leave. Instead, he first looked around and then disappeared in a flash. So fast, Xiao Lingyu was a little surprised because he did not see how the old man left. Xiao Lingyu could even see some powerful sacred gods using teleportation. However, that old man gave Xiao Lingyu the feeling that he suddenly disappeared into thin air. After waiting for all the cultivators to fly away, Xiao Lingyu waited for a few more days before he came out of the primal chaos spectrum. Then, he randomly chose a direction and flew at full speed. In less than 4 hours, he found a group of foreign race cultivators. Then, this group of foreign race cultivators who were at the Divine King stage were all knocked unconscious by him. Xiao Lingyu searched the souls of these foreign race cultivators one by one and obtained some useful information. So, this is a battlefield from ancient times. No wonder it's so dilapidated. This battlefield was where the true experts of ancient times fought. Later on, it became an independent space. It exists parallel to the god realm amidst the spatial turbulence. The entrance to this battlefield will only appear once every 100 billion years. The exit isn't a secret place. In the past, many cultivators from different races have entered this place. However, I've never heard of anyone leaving alive. Legend has it that the cultivators who entered this place could not leave. There are also legends that say that only one cultivator can leave this place. Because the cultivators who left this place disappeared and did not spread the news of what they saw inside. No one knows anything about the situation here. Because this group of foreign race cultivators' cultivation levels were not high, they did not know much. However, this limited information was enough to give Shaolin Yu a headache. This was not the space of the God realm. Therefore, it was impossible to use greater teleportation to leave this place. Moreover, it was very dangerous to use greater teleportation here because the space here was very unstable. In order to obtain more useful information, Shaolin Yu had to search the souls of a few foreign race experts with high cultivation levels. After advancing for another 3 days, he finally found a group of foreign race experts. However, there were more than 20 of them gathered together. These were all sacred gods. They were all sacred gods who had participated in the battle outside. Shaolin Yu was very puzzled. Since they had entered this place to seek opportunities, why did they not disperse or move in groups of 3 or 5? Why did they all gather together? They must know that this place is extremely dangerous. Therefore, they gathered together to deal with the danger with their strongest strength. Shaolin Yu guessed. With so many sacred gods gathered together, they naturally sensed his approach. However, they were very cautious and did not provoke Shaolin Yu. With so many sacred gods gathered together, Shaolin Yu naturally could not rush up and fight them. After following them for a while, he silently retreated. 3 months passed very quickly. Shaolin Yu encountered another group of foreign race experts. They were also a group of more than 20 sacred gods. He did not have a chance to attack. However, in these 3 months, he captured a few more God Emperor stage foreign race experts. However, he did not obtain any useful information. All the information pointed to the fact that this place was extremely dangerous. Chapter 686. Since they did not encounter any danger, it was likely that they had not reached the critical areas of this ancient battlefield. Shaolin Yu did not dare to be careless. Even if he did not want to search for treasures or take risks, he still had to find a way out. In the past, many experts from various races had entered. They must have already cleared the ordinary dangers here. It was fine if they did not encounter any danger here, but if they did, it would be very difficult to deal with. Perhaps it was because they were in the spatial turbulence, and the entire space was far smaller than the divine realm. The spatial pressure here was far greater than the divine realm space. Not only did it slow down the speed of the cultivators, but it also greatly restricted everyone's divine senses. After a few more months, Shaolin Yu still did not encounter any danger. He also did not see any natural treasures on this land. He could not even find any flowers or trees. The entire land was a desert. There was a desolate and ancient aura everywhere, making people feel depressed. There were more than 100 million cultivators from the 2 alien races who had entered this place. Even though this place was not small, they still met often. In the beginning, the cultivators from the 2 races were still able to control themselves and remain calm. However, as time went by, they did not encounter any danger and became more and more relaxed. Now, as long as the cultivators from the 2 races met, they would kill each other, leaving behind countless corpses on the battlefield. The smell of blood began to spread in this world, making everyone feel even more uneasy. Shaolin Yu was still fine. He was very strong and had the chaos spectrum behind. He did not have much of a burden, but he was a little anxious that he could not find a way out. Another half a year passed. Shaolin Yu arrived in front of Stone Forest. Countless tall stone pillars towered into the sky. They were either cylindrical or square pillars. The distance between them was less than 100 feet. They were connected together to form a stone forest. These stone pillars were of different heights. All the stone pillars that could be seen with the naked eye were about 10,000 feet tall, and the lowest was about 1,000 feet tall. The stone forest covered a wide area, with no end in sight. Although they had yet to enter, Xiao Lingyu could already feel the immense pressure. This pressure was formless and formless, but it truly existed. However, ordinary cultivators would not be able to feel it. It seemed like only experts who had reached a certain level of cultivation would be able to feel this pressure. Thus, Xiao Lingyu stood in front of the stone forest for less than an hour before she saw several hundred cultivators below the God Emperor stage charging into the stone forest without any change in expression. The God Emperors and Shang gods who saw this all frowned as they watched from the outside. Xiao Lingyu did not enter the stone forest directly. Instead, she walked around the edge of the stone forest. Along the way, she encountered many foreign race experts, but everyone was looking at the stone forest. This stone forest was obviously a dangerous place. However, treasures were often hidden in dangerous places. Thus, even though everyone knew that this place was dangerous, they were still reluctant to leave. Xiao Lingyu did not have anything to be reluctant about. Right now, he only wanted to leave and had no intention of looking for opportunities. After circling around the stone forest for a period of time, he silently left to see if he could find a way out in other places. Nearly 100 years had passed, and Xiao Lingyu had no choice but to return to the edge of the stone forest. This was because in this ancient battlefield, apart from the endless stone forest, there was nothing else worth looking at, not to mention a way out. If there was a way out, it would definitely be in this stone forest. By now, the experts who had been watching from outside the stone forest had all entered the stone forest. Since those foreign race cultivators dared to enter, Xiao Lingyu naturally did not have too many misgivings. Thus, he braced himself and entered the stone forest. In the beginning, Xiao Lingyu was still able to fly above the stone forest. However, the deeper he went into the stone forest, the more chaotic the space above the stone forest became. Frequently, a wide spatial crack would suddenly appear beside him. Furthermore, these spatial cracks would disappear in a flash. If he was not careful, he would be swallowed by them and fall into the spatial turbulence. Xiao Lingyu had no choice but to descend from the sky and enter the depths of the stone forest from the ground. However, this stone forest had countless stone pillars that were similar in appearance. Furthermore, the entire area was very vast. It was simply a natural maze. Even when flying in the air, it was a little difficult to determine one's direction. When one reached the ground, it was even more difficult to determine where to go. Advancing in the stone forest, he did not encounter any danger. However, he would often encounter the two foreign race cultivators. The foreign race cultivators with slightly higher cultivation would immediately retreat when they saw Xiao Lingyu. However, some cultivators with lower cultivation would attack him. With a wave of his hand, Xiao Lingyu killed a portion of the foreign race cultivators. Then, he knocked out some of them and searched their souls. His expression became more and more serious. From the information obtained from the soul search, he could tell that the foreign race cultivators who attacked him had lost their minds. Their consciousness had already sunk, and they only wanted to kill. The reason these cultivators were like this was probably because they had been trapped here for too long. Thus, they were anxious and uneasy. Furthermore, the layout of the stone forest should be a test of the cultivator's mental state. There would be an invisible force constantly corroding the cultivators' minds, causing them to fall into madness and lose their rationality. The foreign race cultivators with higher cultivation did not attack Xiao Lingyu when they saw him. This was probably because they could withstand the mental state test of the stone forest. Xiao Lingyu continued to search for a way out of the stone forest. As time passed, more and more foreign race cultivators fell into a frenzy. Naturally, the number of attacks Xiao Lingyu suffered increased as well. However, these crazy foreign race cultivators who attacked him in groups of 2s and 3s would not be able to harm Xiao Lingyu at all. However, What surprised Xiao Yu was that his mental state fluctuated as well. For some reason, he became impatient and frustrated. One day, 1,000 years after he entered the stone forest, Xiao Yu, who could not find a way out, even attacked a stone pillar. Is there a possibility that I will fall into madness too? Even though Xiao Yu realized that something was wrong with him, he could not calm himself down. His thoughts became more and more chaotic. It was as if countless mosquitoes and flies were buzzing in his head. Needless to say, the stone pillar looked like it was full of holes from the erosion of time. However, it could withstand a casual attack from Xiao Yu without collapsing. In the following period of time, the foreign race cultivators who attacked him were not only weak cultivators. Many godly kings and godly emperors charged at him with bloodshot eyes. They did not consider whether they could deal with the person in front of them. After being injured by Xiao Yu's aura, they still charged at him. Xiao Yu felt that the situation was too strange. Thus, he hid in the primal chaos spectrum before he lost his mind. Why are your eyes red? Miao Ying asked Xiao Yu. Xiao Yu frowned slightly and said, I'm not too sure either. The stone forest outside is very strange. If it's not an extremely powerful formation, then it's filled with some special things that cause cultivators to lose their minds. Then don't go out first. Stabilize your mind and recover your mental state. We'll talk again after you've recovered, Qin Xian reminded him. Xiao Yu nodded. Then he sat down cross-legged and began to meditate quietly. However, what surprised Xiao Yu was that even though he was hiding in the primal chaos spectrum and was no longer affected by the special arrangement of the stone forest, he still found it difficult to calm his mind. Moreover, the anxiety in his heart was getting more and more difficult to suppress. He felt as if there was a volcano that had been accumulating in his body for hundreds of millions of years. It had to erupt. Qin Xian and Miao Ying also realized that Xiao Yu's eyes were getting redder and redder. There was also an unrecognizable evil aura flowing out of his body. The more it was like this, the more Xiao Yu did not dare to go out. Qin Xian and Miao Ying also did not dare to let him go. However, after hiding in the primal chaos spectrum for less than 10,000 years, Xiao Yu felt that he could no longer maintain his mental clarity. He could fall into madness at any time. In his eyes, scenes of bloody battlefields, mountains of corpses, rivers of blood, and illusions of his friends and family being slaughtered kept appearing. This invisibly caused the killing intent in his soul to surge violently. In his ears, there were constant sounds of war drums, accompanied by a solemn and powerful war song that he had never heard before. It made his blood boil, and his desire to kill was uncontrollable. I can't continue staying in the primal chaos spectrum. If I fall into madness here and attack my friends and family, the losses will outweigh the gains. Even if I go crazy, I have to go crazy outside. Xiao Yu took advantage of the strand of clarity he still had. He did not ask Qin Xian and Miao Ying and directly rushed out a light door. Once again, Xiao Yu entered the stone forest. He maintained his mental clarity for less than 3 days before he fell into madness. He stayed in the primal chaos spectrum for 10,000 years, but in reality, only a year had passed in the outside world. If he did not enter the primal chaos spectrum, he should not have fallen into madness within a year. At this moment, the saint gods outside did not fall into madness. However, all the god emperors had bloodshot eyes and were killing everywhere. Xiao Yu was the same. He had fallen into madness. He would attack any cultivator he saw. Cultivators below the saint god stage could only be insta-killed by him. Many saint gods immediately retreated when they saw him. Since he had lost his mind, he naturally would not search for a way out. He was only venting his killing intent everywhere. The more cultivators he killed, the crazier Xiao Yu became. He was bathed in blood and was surrounded by a dense bloody light. The saint gods who had not fallen into madness gradually realized that there was a freakishly powerful expert in the stone forest who was going crazy. They had once organized to kill Xiao Yu, but they could only gather 5 or 6 saint gods. After a fierce battle with Xiao Yu, 2 saint gods died in battle. Only then did they understand that this crazy expert was not someone they could deal with. However, less than 1,000 years after Xiao Lingyu fell into madness, all the cultivators in the stone forest, including the saint gods, had lost their minds. Endless slaughter continued to take place in the stone forest. No one noticed that the stone pillars had changed at this moment. Chapter 687. Somewhere in the stone forest, a thin old man was sitting cross-legged on top of a stone pillar that was about 10,000 feet tall. A jade slip was floating above the old man's head. At this time, the jade slip was constantly emitting a faint golden light, enveloping the old man in golden light. The blood mist that was constantly gushing out from the stone pillar and the arrangement in the stone forest that could corrode a cultivator's soul did not seem to affect the old man at all. Feeling the changes in the stone forest, the old man opened his eyes and muttered to himself, "Such a bloodthirsty demon array. I fear that only an ancient demonic path giant could arrange it. Even after so many years, it still has such power and influence. Let them fight for a while first. It won't be too late for me to make a move when the last one is left." After muttering to himself, the old man closed his eyes again, as if he did not care about the changes in the stone forest. The stone pillars in the stone forest were constantly moving. Under the effect of the array, the cultivators who entered the stone forest encountered each other more and more often, making the battle more intense. Although they had lost their minds, all the experts had a very good fighting instinct. Some of the spells and magic treasures that they were familiar with could be used in battle. Under the effect of the blood mist, all the cultivators became more and more courageous as they fought. The killing intent on their bodies was almost condensed into a substance. The two clans had a large number of cultivators, but now there was probably less than 1% of them left. Only the experts were left. The battle continued. The endless blood mist had already drowned the stone forest. From outside the stone forest, or in the air, the tall stone pillars could no longer be seen. In the blood mist, in addition to the sounds of the cultivators fighting, there was also a burst of demonic sound. It was as if thousands of demons were roaring together, causing one's expression to change. What was even more strange was that the blood mist could condense into shapes. They were all hideous and terrifying. They were tall, as if countless bloodthirsty demons had gathered here. The cultivators who were in a state of madness did not care about the changes in the environment. They killed blindly and died in the slaughter. Having lost their minds, the experts of the two clans naturally did not band together or cooperate. They even frequently attacked experts of their own clans. Under such circumstances, Xiao Lingyu was naturally extremely advantageous. Even if he did not release the 8 black armor clones or use any magic treasures, he could still easily kill Saint God experts. Even if he was surrounded by several Saint Gods who had lost their minds, he could still kill his way out. However, the situation was so chaotic that everyone only knew how to kill. They did not know how to rest or avoid danger. In the frenzy of battle, injuries were naturally inevitable. At this moment, even Xiao Lingyu's body that was comparable to an ordinary saint artifact was covered in wounds. Blood continuously flowed from his wounds, but Xiao Lingyu did not know how to seal them. No one leaped into the air. Instead, they walked quickly on the ground of the stone forest in search of their opponents. Every step they took left behind bloody footprints, as if they were demons crawling out from a sea of blood. The stone pillars were constantly moving in order to gather the scattered cultivators together. Any cultivator who entered the stone forest would not be able to escape the slaughter. At this rate, there would definitely be only one cultivator left in the stone forest, and that cultivator would naturally be the strongest. Of course, in a state of madness, the cultivator's strength would be greatly reduced. However, the degree of reduction would not be the same. Some cultivators who were clearly very strong when they were sober would have their strength greatly reduced after going berserk. They might not be able to defeat weaker cultivators who were weaker than them, but whose strength had not decreased by much in a state of madness. In a battle below the heavenly ascension realm, Xiao Lingyu's advantages were too obvious, especially with his fleshly body that was comparable to a sacred artifact, as well as the extremely powerful primal true fire. He was able to stand in an invincible position in this kind of crazy battle. In addition, such battles would drag on for a long time. No one would deliberately recover their strength. Xiao Lingyu had countless blood crystals to help him store his strength, which was also a great advantage. A strong body, powerful primal chaos, true fire, and sufficient strength. These advantages could be used automatically even in a state of madness. It was not like some spells or magic treasures that cultivators who had lost their rationality could not use or control. Less than a month had passed since the stone forest began to be filled with blood mist. There were only 2 cultivators left in the stone forest who had gone berserk, and one of them was Xiao Lingyu. However, the foreign race expert was already an arrow at the end of its flight. His body was covered in terrifying wounds, and his body was swaying. Even so, the foreign race's saint deity did not hesitate to attack Xiao Lingyu. However, just as he reached Xiao Lingyu sent him flying with a kick. The foreign race's saint deity's body fiercely smashed into a stone pillar and fell heavily. However, he struggled to get up and pounced at Xiao Lingyu again. When he approached again, Xiao Lingyu grabbed the foreign race's saint deity's arms. Huh! Xiao Lingyu roared and tore off the foreign race's saint deity's arms, causing blood to splatter everywhere. The foreign race's saint deity only cried out in pain and then tried to bite Xiao Lingyu with his mouth. On the other hand, Xiao Lingyu's hand was like a blade as it chopped down on the saint god's neck, instantly beheading him. The only cultivator left who had gone berserk was Xiao Lingyu. The blood mist in the stone forest churned even more violently. The roars of countless demons were like thunder that shook the sky. The entire stone forest was shaking, and the stone pillars were moving at a much faster speed. What was even stranger was that many of the stone pillars, which were originally erected on the ground, stuck close to each other as they rapidly moved. Some of the stone pillars even rose from the ground and piled up together. In 10 minutes, all the stone pillars in the stone forest stopped moving, and a tall and majestic fortress that occupied an extremely large area was formed. There was a wide and tall stone platform in the middle of the fortress. The stone platform was like a plaza, but it also looked like a coliseum. The structure of the fortress was very simple. From the outside, it looked like a flat wall made of huge stones. From inside, it looked like a circle of stairs that led to the audience seats of the arena. The demons formed by the blood mist were all on the stairs. Their bodies became more and more solid as they bared their fangs and brandished their claws and roared wantonly. They were like demons from the underworld that had been resurrected from ancient times. If Xiao Lingyu was conscious, he would definitely feel his scalp go numb. But now that he had lost his mind, he was still waving at the demons around him. It was as if the demons were cheering for him and cheering for him. At this moment, the elder who had not been affected by the array flew down from the top of the fortress and landed on the stone platform. He was only a few hundred feet away from Xiao Lingyu. Xiao Lingyu, who had lost his mind, naturally rushed up excitedly when he saw an opponent on the platform. When the old man saw that Xiao Lingyu was charging towards him, he did not panic in the slightest. With a piece of jade on his head, his body was wrapped in a circle of faint golden light. When Xiao Lingyu arrived in front of him, his body swayed, and he moved 2 feet to the side. Xiao Lingyu, who was charging at him aggressively, naturally missed. Furthermore, his left shoulder was tightly grabbed by the elder. The elder pulled hard. He thought that he would be able to tear the other party's arm off, but instead, he flung the other party's entire body away. His physical body is so strong. The elder was a little surprised, but he moved again. In a flash, he was in front of Xiao Lingyu again. After Xiao Lingyu was flung away, he crashed onto the stone platform. Before he could get up, the elder had already raised his foot and stomped down viciously. Xiao Lingyu, who still had 70% of his combat strength, was not slow at all despite his madness. He rolled his body and dodged the other party's kick. Bang! The seemingly weak old man stomped his foot down, creating a huge hole in the incomparably hard stone platform. With the large hole as the center, there were even more than 10 cracks in the stone slab. If this stomp had landed on Shaolin Yu, even if his body was comparable to a Saint artifact, he would probably vomit blood even if a few of his ribs were not broken. After rolling, Shaolin Yu quickly got up. He pushed his feet back and dove towards his opponent like a fish. Although Shaolin Yu's movements were as fast as lightning, the Elder was even faster. Before Shaolin Yu could reach him, the Elder had already dodged to the side and raised his elbow to smash Shaolin Yu's back. The force of this elbow was very strong. Although Shaolin Yu was thrown a few feet forward, he still landed heavily on the stone slab and could not help but vomit a mouthful of blood. Regardless of whether it was strength or speed, the Elder was much stronger than Shaolin Yu at this moment. He far surpassed the other sacred gods and was probably at the Heaven Ascension realm. Only a Heaven Ascension realm expert could maintain such a large advantage in front of Shaolin Yu. After landing again, Shaolin Yu quickly got up again. He was in a state of madness and did not feel the slightest bit of pain. The Elder frowned slightly and muttered to himself in a low voice, "This formation is too strange. It actually restricts the use of divine abilities and spells. It also does not allow me to communicate with any power between heaven and earth. I can't even use any magic treasures. Otherwise, I would be able to destroy this kid in one move." Since he was always at a disadvantage in close combat, Shaolin Yu instinctively formed the Primal Chaos Seal. However, the Primal Chaos Seal did not appear. He also found that he could not release his power, and his consciousness was firmly confined in his sea of consciousness. However, Shaolin Yu, who was unconscious, did not mind whether or not he could cast spells, nor did he want to use any magic treasures. He rushed towards the old man again. However, no matter how Shaolin Yu charged, the Elder was able to dodge with a simple movement and use his fists and legs to attack him. Although the Elder's fists and legs were strong and could easily injure an ordinary sacred god, Shaolin Yu's body was too strong. Even if he was hit repeatedly by the Elder, he would only suffer a surge in his blood and chi. Moreover, whenever Shaolin Yu was hit, the special energy in his body that he had absorbed from the Thunder Fiend Karmic Fire would help him reduce the impact of the attack. As a result, it would be very difficult for the Elder to finish off Shaolin Yu in a short period of time. The Elder gradually discovered that the spatial pressure on the stone platform was gradually increasing. His and his opponent's strength would be greatly restricted. Chapter 688. This was the battle that Shaolin Yu had to face alone. He was also the strongest opponent he had ever faced. The old man's cultivation level was much higher than Shaolin Yu's. Although the advantage in cultivation level was not obvious in this special battle arena, the old man's attacks were definitely not inferior to Shaolin Yu's. Furthermore, the speed of his attacks was much faster than Shaolin Yu's. Shaolin Yu's attacks were almost useless against the old man. On the other hand, the old man's attacks hit Shaolin Yu every time. Shaolin Yu was at an absolute disadvantage. He could not retaliate at all. If not for his strong body, he would have died on the spot. The spatial pressure was getting stronger. Not only did Shaolin Yu's speed decrease, but even the old man was much slower than before. Moreover, an hour had passed since the battle began. Although Shaolin Yu's injuries had worsened, the jade slip above the old man's head had also dimmed and fallen into his body. It was unknown whether it was because of the exhaustion of energy, or because the external pressure was too great, or because of the restrictions of the formation. The old man's sinister face turned even uglier. He said in surprise, "To think that even divine spiritual treasures would be restricted. I was too naive." The jade slip sank into his body. The old man's body was no longer enveloped by the golden light. The erosion of the array's state of mind and consciousness would naturally affect him as well. "I have to end this battle quickly." The old man finally stopped dodging and attacking passively. He took the initiative to attack. Shaolin Yu pounced at him. He endured the immense spatial pressure and met him head-on. Bang! The old man kicked out, and Xiao Yu's body flew back dozens of feet. Xiao Yu landed on the hard stone platform and spat out a few mouthfuls of blood. However, he quickly stood up. Unfortunately, just as he stood up, the old man came at him again and punched him in the chest. Bang! Xiao Yu was sent flying again. However, he stood up again. Bang! 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 In the next 2 hours, the old man repeatedly attacked Xiao Yu. However, every time he was knocked down, Xiao Yu was able to stand up again. However, Xiao Yu could get up immediately after being knocked down. Later on, he had to crawl on the stone platform for a while before he could get up. The reason for this was not only because his injuries were getting worse, but also because the spatial pressure was too strong. The speed of the old man's attacks was naturally much slower. Moreover, in just a short 2 hours, fine veins had appeared in his eyes, and there was a faint blood-red glow on his body. Go to hell, brat. Xiao Yu stood up again. The old man roared as he knocked him down again. However, the old man was already showing signs of madness. It seemed that he had also been eroded by the formation, and his state of mind was no longer stable. Xiao Yu could only passively take a beating. He could not dodge the old man's attacks. Therefore, the increasing spatial pressure was beneficial to him. The old man's attack speed had decreased. Not only did it reduce the number of times Xiao Yu was hit, but it also reduced the old man's strength. The old man's attacks were getting weaker and weaker. Xiao Yu could withstand the old man's attacks. Although Xiao Yu's injuries were very serious, Xiao Yu could still withstand the old man's attacks. Xiao Yu's body had been tempered thousands of times. He had been severely injured, tortured, and destroyed countless times. Even if he was seriously injured, he would not collapse. If this continues, I'll be dragged into a state of madness by this kid. He might even exhaust me to death. The old man made up his mind. Although he had not lost his mind, he crushed a specially made bag. After the bag was crushed, a golden light shone out. The golden light circled in front of him and turned into a golden armored puppet. The golden armored puppet was 10 feet tall. It was clad in golden armor, held a golden spear, wore a golden helmet, and wore golden boots. It looked mighty and extraordinary. Kill him, the old man shouted at the golden armored puppet. The golden armored puppet was very obedient. Although its eyes were empty, its steps were steady and firm. It waved the spear in its hand and stabbed it at Xiao Yu. Although Xiao Yu still had the instinct to dodge the attack, his injuries were too serious. The spatial pressure here was too great. His shoulder was still pierced by the spear. There was already a wound on his shoulder, and the spear happened to pierce the wound. He immediately felt pain. However, this pain did not affect him much, because he was in a state of madness. He grabbed the golden spear with a sinister smile and pulled it out of his shoulder. Haha, you have a helper, but so do I. Xiao Yu laughed maniacally. Then he slapped himself, and 8 black lights immediately flew out. The 8 black lights circled for a while and turned into 8 black armored clones. If the old man had not released the golden armored puppet, Xiao Yu, who was in a state of madness, would not have thought of his black armored clones at all. The 8 black armored clones circled above the chaotic divine infant all year round. When Xiao Yu was cultivating in seclusion in the chaotic spectrum, he often used the chaotic primordial fire to temper the 8 clones. Now, the strength of the clones' bodies was not inferior to Xiao Yu's. The 8 black armored clones did not participate in the battle earlier. Although they were affected by the injuries of their original bodies and their strength was slightly reduced, they were not injured and were in very good condition. Whether it was the golden armored puppet or the 8 black armored clones, they were naturally restricted by the spatial pressure. However, there were 8 black armored clones after all, and only 1 golden armored puppet. The golden armored puppet did not have the strength of the old man. Moreover, it was already surrounded by the 8 black armored clones. Under the attacks of the 8 clones, it only lasted for less than 100 breaths before collapsing. The golden armored puppet was also not as tenacious as Xiao Yu. After it collapsed, it was unable to stand up again. Even the spear in its hand was snatched away by one of the black-armored clones. The old man did not stop. As his golden-armored puppet was defeated, he struck Xiaoling Yu a few more times, but the effect was minimal. When the 8 black-armored clones finished off the golden-armored puppet and surrounded Xiaoling Yu, the old man finally realized the severity of the problem. His expression changed again and again, and he actually gave up on continuing to attack. While he was still conscious, he left the stone platform. The old man moved with all his strength and quickly landed on the platform. He then climbed up the stone steps that surrounded the city and climbed to the top. This divine master cultivator actually wanted to flee without a fight, and even wanted to escape from a siege. The demons formed by the blood mist that were originally roaring on the stone steps pounced on the old man. The old man was also valiant. He constantly waved his arms and beat the demons into clouds of blood mist. However, there were too many demons in the siege. They crazily surged over and caused great trouble for the old man. The old man climbed the stone steps very slowly. The old man was already very irritated and angry when he could not defeat Xiaoling Yu for a long time. In addition, the formation here was corroding his mind, and he was on the verge of madness. Now that he was surrounded and attacked by the demons, his state of mind fell even faster. Before he reached the top of the siege, he had already lost his state of mind and had completely sunk into madness. When the old man was escaping, Xiaoling Yu, who was in a state of madness, wanted to chase after him. However, he was heavily injured and suppressed by the great force, so he could not move at all. After falling into madness, the old man naturally would not go to the top of the siege. Moreover, the demons deliberately blocked him, causing him to change direction and return to the stone platform. Once on the stone platform, the old man brazenly charged at Xiaoling Yu. His attacks were no longer as steady and methodical as before. At first, the old man was still able to maintain his speed advantage, but gradually his movements slowed down. In the end, the old man slowly approached the 8 black-armored clones and was firmly held down by them and pressed against the stone platform. Then, the irrational Xiaoling Yu and the 8 black-armored clones tore at the old man's body like ferocious beasts. They even used their teeth to bite him like hungry wolves pouncing on their prey. The old man was the same. He also wanted to bite back, but his limbs and head were firmly held down by the clones. He was the one who could not move at all. This old man was destined to be one of the most tragic Empyrean experts in the divine realm. Not only did he die in battle on this stone platform, he died in an incomparably miserable manner. No one could imagine that an Empyrean expert would be eaten alive by someone else. The old man's divine infant was naturally not spared. His divine infant was much weaker than his physical body, and it was even more delicious to Xiaoling Yu, who was in a state of madness. After his physical body and divine infant were eaten piece by piece, the old man's divine soul golden pearl was not chewed because it was too tough. However, the soul power contained in it was slowly dissipating. Without his physical body and divine infant, the consciousness in the divine soul golden pearl gradually dissipated. The formation's corrosion of the soul completely seeped into the divine soul golden pearl without any hindrance. A divine master powerhouse died, just like that. Of the cultivators who entered this ancient battlefield from the outside, only Xiaoling Yu was left. As for the 8 black-armored clones, they eventually sank into Xiaoling Yu's dantian because they were under too much pressure. The spatial pressure was too strong. The heavily injured Xiaoling Yu crawled on the stone platform. Although she struggled with all her might, she could not get up. After persevering on the stone platform for a while, Xiaoling Yu finally fainted. Less than 4 hours after Xiaoling Yu fainted, the encirclement started to shake again. The stone pillars that formed the encirclement began to reassemble. As the stone pillars reassembled, the demon formed by the blood mist rapidly gathered together and liquefied. Gradually, it turned into a blob of blood water the size of a watermelon. The strange thing was that after the blob of blood water trembled slightly, it slowly turned into a little blood man that looked like a nascent soul. The little blood man was only half a foot tall, but he appeared to be very agile. He flew around Xiao Yu in a circle and actually spoke in human language. He said with great satisfaction, "This body is not bad. Although this fellow has not reached the divine master realm. Once I recover, cultivation will not be a problem. After waiting for so many years, seeing that this space could no longer hold on, the heavens actually sent me such a good body. My painstaking efforts were not in vain. Once I recover, I will definitely bathe Divine Master Island in blood." Chapter 689. As soon as the little bloody man touched Xiao Yu's body, it quickly melted and turned into a blood-red halo that wrapped around Xiao Yu's body. In an instant, Xiao Yu suddenly opened his eyes, which were completely blood-red. "I'm not used to it, but I think I can still cast a spell to leave this place." The little bloody man's voice sounded again, and then Xiao Yu's fingers began to move rapidly while he chanted an incantation. Accompanied by the set of mysterious seals and the awkward incantation, the surrounding stone pillars moved faster. After 10 minutes, countless stone pillars piled up to form a huge hexagonal stone array. Xiao Yu was in the center of the stone array at this time. Groups of seals were constantly being formed, and blood-red incantation patterns began to appear on the surface of the hexagonal stone array. When Xiao Yu stopped, the surface of the hexagonal stone array had begun to flow with blood-red light, but the blood-red light on his body had weakened a lot. "The array is completed, but I'm afraid I'll have to sleep for a while before I can wake up and recover my strength. It's good enough that I can leave this place with such a good body. I'll sleep on this kid. As long as he doesn't provoke too powerful experts, no one will be able to find me. That reaching heaven cultivator has a lot of good things on him. I can't leave them here and waste them." While speaking, Xiao Yu directly swallowed some magic treasures and storage rings lying on the ground into his stomach, and then continued to form seals with a solemn expression. Not long after, a hexagonal blood-red light seal appeared on Xiao Yu's chest. As he shouted, the blood-red light seal whizzed out and flew into the air. Realm-breaking blood escape, activate. Accompanied by the shout, the hexagonal blood-red light seal suddenly expanded countless times in the air, and then fell from the sky and sank into the hexagonal stone array. Suddenly, the hexagonal stone array began to shake violently, and a mighty blood-red light beam bombarded a point in the void. After 10 breaths, a terrifying black vortex appeared in the void that was bombarded. The black vortex spun faster and faster, and the hexagonal stone array shook even more violently. Another 100 breaths passed, and the hexagonal stone formation began to spin rapidly along with the black vortex, gradually turning into a huge blood-colored cocoon of light that tightly wrapped around Xiao Yu. The blood-colored cocoon of light slowly wrapped around Xiao Yu and flew into the black vortex. When it completely fell into the black vortex, it suddenly accelerated, and like an arrow leaving a bow, it flew deeper into the vortex. In the process of flying forward, the thickness of the blood-colored cocoon continued to decrease, as if a lot of its power had been consumed on the way. After an hour, the blood-red cocoon of light finally emerged from the black vortex. By then, only a thin layer of the cocoon was left. At this moment, the bloody light on Xiao Yu's body became very weak. He fell from the void and landed on a beach in the sea. This world-piercing blood escape consumes too much energy. I have to sleep immediately. This should be Skyspan's sacred island. After saying this, Xiao Yu collapsed on the beach, allowing the sea breeze to blow and the waves to beat on his body. After an unknown period of time, a group of cultivators with dragon heads and human bodies arrived on the beach. They quickly discovered Xiao Yu and carefully surrounded him. The group of cultivators circled Xiao Yu a few times, and then one of them took out a large harpoon and viciously stabbed it at Xiao Yu's chest. To the cultivator's surprise, Their sharp harpoon could not pierce Xiao Lingyu's body. Then, the cultivator with the harpoon leaped high into the air and quickly landed, his harpoon striking down again. What happened next shocked them even more. When the harpoon pierced Xiao Lingyu's chest, it actually broke with a crack. Then, all the cultivators took out their own weapons and attacked Xiao Lingyu's body. However, their weapons either broke or curled up. They could not do anything to Xiao Lingyu. They could not even cut Xiao Lingyu's skin. The group of cultivators chattered for a while, then carried Xiao Lingyu with their backs to the sea. After 3 days, the group of cultivators arrived at a small village and placed Xiao Lingyu at the village entrance. After a cultivator entered the village, he ran wildly and shouted. Not long after, countless cultivators were attracted to the village entrance, surrounding Xiao Lingyu so tightly that not even a drop of water could trickle through. The cultivators in the village all had dragon heads and human bodies, but their cultivation was not high. Not long after, an elderly cultivator came to the village entrance. He stared at Xiao Lingyu for a while, his expression uncertain. After the old man's strange shout, the cultivators surrounding the village entrance carried Xiao Lingyu into the village. In the middle of the village, there was a small square. In the middle of the square, there was a large iron pillar that needed 3 people to wrap their arms around. The group of cultivators tied Xiao Lingyu to the iron pillar. Thick iron chains that seemed to be made of black iron were used to tie her up. They looked very sturdy. After that, the old man opened his mouth and spat out a stream of scorching flames at the iron pillar. Suddenly, the entire iron pillar began to burn like a piece of wood. The cultivators in the square all clapped their hands and cheered. They circled around the iron pillar and danced a strange dance while singing an even stranger song. Xiao Lingyu's body was probably the least afraid of being burned by fire. Moreover, the flames on the iron pillar were not very strong. They could not harm Xiao Lingyu in the slightest. After burning for 3 whole days, the old man saw that the flames did not seem to have any effect. He cast a spell to extinguish the flames. Then, he took out a transmission pearl and sent out a message. A few more days passed. A divine light flew into the sky above the village and landed directly on the square. The newcomer was also a dragon head cultivator. However, his cultivation was clearly much higher than the cultivators in the village. The old man and the cultivator exchanged a few words. The cultivator circled the iron pillar a few more times. Then, the old man released the iron chains and wrapped Xiao Lingyu's body with divine power. He flew into the sky. After a few more days, the cultivator stopped in front of a small city gate. The cultivator brought Xiao Lingyu into the city lord's manor. Not long after, an even stronger dragon head cultivator came to the small city and brought Xiao Lingyu away. This stronger dragon head cultivator brought Xiao Lingyu to a rather large city. Similarly, he tied her up in a secret room under the city lord's manor. There was also a large iron pillar in this secret room. Xiao Lingyu was tied to the pillar. The pillar burned with raging flames. The flames were strong enough to cause the space of the god realm to tremble slightly. However, they were unable to harm Xiao Lingyu's body in the slightest. The dragon head city lord of this large city waited in the secret room for close to 3 months. In the end, he had no choice but to extinguish the flames. He could only take out his transmission pearl and report this matter to his superiors. However, this time, it took close to 10 years for a single God Emperor stage flood dragon head expert to arrive. When the God Emperor stage dragon-headed expert saw Xiao Lingyu, his face changed drastically. He carefully observed Xiao Lingyu for a while, and only when he was sure that Xiao Lingyu was unconscious did he feel relieved. After hesitating for a long time, this dragon-head God Emperor expert wrapped Xiao Lingyu's body and flew out of the large city. After flying for 10 years, passing by countless small villages and cities of various sizes, this God Emperor expert finally stopped in front of a mountain range. This mountain range was very large. There were countless mountain peaks that rose and fell continuously. However, compared to a real mountain range, it was much smaller. It could barely be considered a small mountain range. On the mountain peaks of this mountain range, there are many clearly visible caves. Many dragonhead cultivators moved between the mountain peaks and entered these caves. Rather than calling it a mountain range, it was more appropriate to call it a place where countless dragonhead cultivators gathered. Its scale was much larger than an ordinary city. From the appearance of this mountain range, one could guess that the dragonhead cultivators had deliberately built this small mountain range into a large city. The dragonhead god emperor expert flew into the mountain range with Shaolin Yu. He did not meet with any obstructions along the way. He smoothly reached the depths of the mountain range. In the depths of the mountain range, there was a towering mountain that reached the clouds. This mountain was also the only one in this mountain range that did not seem to have a single cave. Around this mountain, there were 9 slightly shorter mountain peaks. They surrounded the mountain like stars surrounding the moon. No matter if it was the main peak of the mountain in the center or the 9 sub-peaks around it, they were all very quiet. It was rare to see any dragonhead cultivators entering or leaving. Furthermore, there was a flat plaza at the top of each mountain. There was a very thick iron pillar at the top of each of the 9 secondary peaks. On the main peak, there was an even thicker iron pillar at the top of the main peak. There was also an ancient and heavy temple. The iron pillar at the top of the main peak stood in front of the temple with its doors shut. It was engraved with complex and mysterious runes. The dragonhead god emperor expert first brought Shaolin Yu to the foot of one of the sub-peaks. He found a stone wall and placed Shaolin Yu down. He then formed seals and sent them into the stone wall. After a moment, the stone wall disappeared, revealing a cave entrance. After bringing Shaolin Yu into the cave entrance disappeared. The cave was very deep, and there was a slope that extended upwards. After walking for the time it took to brew a cup of tea, the cave became slightly more spacious. A large cave appeared in front of them. In the center of the cave, there was a green stone. An old dragonhead cultivator was sitting on the green stone with his eyes closed. He seemed to be cultivating. After the dragonhead god emperor expert entered the cave, he bowed respectfully. When the expert on the green stone opened his eyes, he went forward to say a few words. After chatting for a while, the old man on the green stone waved his hand at the dragonhead god emperor expert. The dragonhead god emperor expert bowed and left. The old man on the green stone waved his sleeve. Shaolin Yu's body was swept up by an invisible force and slowly moved to the front of the old man. The old man first observed for a while. Suddenly, he opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of raging flames. The raging flames instantly enveloped Shaolin Yu's body. However, after burning for a long time, nothing strange happened. Chapter 690. But this time, the old man didn't tie Shaolin Yu to the iron pillar at the top of the secondary peak. Instead, he brought Shaolin Yu to the top of the iron pillar, then made a hand seal and sent it into the iron pillar. The moment the hand seal entered the iron pillar, a dazzling light flashed out, enveloping the old man and Shaolin Yu as they flew to the top of the main peak. A moment later, the old man and Shaolin Yu landed at the top of the iron pillar in the plaza at the top of the main peak. Then, they floated down and arrived in front of the sealed temple. The old man walked to the temple's door and lightly knocked on the door knocker. Not long after, the temple's mahogany door creaked open. The old man wrapped Shaolin Yu in his divine power and walked into the temple, arriving at a large hall. The hall wasn't very spacious, and there were 9 iron pillars inside, making it seem even more spacious. At the center of the 9 iron pillars was a mysterious 9-pointed star formation, as well as a prayer mat. A thin cultivator was sitting cross-legged on the prayer mat with his back facing the temple's door. The old man with the dragon head took 2 steps forward, bowed deeply, and said a few words. Only then did the cultivator, sitting on the praying mat, turn around, revealing a shocking face. From the front, the cultivator was clearly a woman. She had a slender waist, a pair of full breasts, a neck as white as jade, and a pair of slender, jade-like hands. If one only looked at her, they would definitely think that she was a peerlessly beautiful human woman. However, if an ordinary cultivator were to look at the woman's face, they would definitely be given a fright. Her face was the clean and delicate face of a human woman, but the other half was the side of a snake's face. Only half of the human female's head had hair. The snake-like half was bald and covered in tiny scales. One of the eyes was a human's, while the other was a snake's. If this woman covered her snake face and only looked at her human face, she would definitely be a devastatingly beautiful woman. The old man must have seen this woman often, so he wasn't surprised by her strange appearance. However, he didn't dare to look at her for too long. After saying a few words with his head lowered, he silently left the temple. The temple's door closed again, but it wasn't dark inside. The woman waved her hand, and Xiao Yu's body was teleported in front of her. She stared at Xiao Yu for a long while, her eyebrows knitted together. He's a human expert. What realm is he at? His body is comparable to a sacred artifact. Has he entered the ingress realm? Even my divine sense can't penetrate his body, but he's clearly in a deep sleep. Why does he give me a sinister feeling? The injuries on his body haven't healed yet. He must have just gone through a great battle and was seriously injured, which is why he fainted. The woman muttered as she observed Xiao Yu. Strangely, the woman's words were exactly the same as human cultivators. This person's body is overflowing with an evil aura. I'm afraid he's not a kind person. If he wakes up, it'll be detrimental to our clan. No, we have to send him out of our clan. No, his injuries have already stabilized. If he wakes up on the road, do we have to take advantage of this situation and kill him in our clan? If there are other experts behind him, won't killing him bring trouble to our clan? Let's seal him in a heavenly coffin first. Thinking of this, the woman stood up and continuously formed seals with her hands, sending them into the 9 large iron pillars around her. After the seals were completed, the 9 pillars suddenly shot out a beam of divine light at the same time. The 9 beams of divine light shot towards the wall facing the temple's door. Immediately, an almost transparent crystal coffin appeared at the base of the wall. The woman dragged Xiao Yu's body to the crystal coffin and waved her arm. In the next moment, Xiao Yu's body fell into the crystal coffin. However, the coffin never opened. With a body comparable to a saint artifact, he should be able to withstand the heavenly fire for a period of time. If an expert comes during this time, I'll let him out and tell him to heal with the heavenly fire in the heavenly coffin. After all, heavenly fire does have a healing effect on experts of the immortal ascension realm. If no expert comes, the heavenly fire will occasionally burn away his flesh and blood while healing him, causing his body's resistance to decline. At that time, I'll cast a spell, and he'll be incinerated into nothingness by the heavenly fire in the heavenly coffin. The woman sneered and formed a seal with a wave of her hand. The seal sank into the crystal coffin and caused it to tremble. Then, a ball of brilliant white flames appeared and enveloped Xiao Yu's body. Then, the woman returned to the center of the 9 great iron pillars and sat cross-legged on the square prayer mat. After waiting quietly for nearly a month and seeing that the human cultivator in the crystal coffin was still and unharmed, the woman formed another seal and sent it into the 9 great iron pillars. The 9 great iron pillars once again released divine light and blasted the wall opposite the door. A moment later, the crystal coffin was concealed. The woman formed a lotus with her hand and slowly closed her eyes. 100 years passed in the blink of an eye. The temple was still as quiet as ever, and the woman did not move at all. However, Xiao Yu, who was in the crystal coffin, finally began to regain consciousness and gradually woke up. If not for the scorching flames burning his body and the intense pain that came from his body and shook his soul, Xiao Yu might have been unconscious for a long time. When he opened his eyes, Xiao Yu was still a little groggy. However, the burning pain in his body was even clearer now, Xiao Lingyu instinctively wanted to get up, but just as he raised his head, he felt his head collide with a hard object. Xiao Lingyu felt like he was in a dream. He quickly calmed himself down. In an unknown place, he had to be calm. Right now, he was being burned by extremely powerful flames. His body was already a little overwhelmed, but he could still hold on for a while. Using this time, Xiao Lingyu began to recall everything that had happened before. Unfortunately, he could only remember that he came out of the primal chaos spectrum and then fell into madness. However, he did not have any memory of what happened after the madness. Right, there was the primal chaos spectrum. Thinking of this, Xiao Lingyu immediately shouted, "Primal chaos spectrum, take me in." The primal chaos spectrum did not disappoint him. Even in this special environment, the primal chaos spectrum still easily took him in. As soon as he entered the primal chaos spectrum, Xiao Lingyu did not have time to rest before he was surrounded by Miao Ying, Qing Xian, and Ling. Xiao Lingyu had not fallen into madness for long. But after all, the flow of time in the primal chaos spectrum was 10,000 times faster. 100 years outside was 1,000,000 years inside. Moreover, it was far more than 100 years outside. During this period of time, the three women in the primal chaos spectrum were constantly worried about Xiao Lingyu. After all, when Xiao Lingyu went out, he was in a state of madness. And in the primal chaos spectrum, only Xiao Lingyu could see the scene outside through the light door. I'm fine. You guys go to the side first, and let me have a good rest." Xiao Lingyu waved his hand to the three women, then immediately sat down cross-legged and fed himself some pills. The three women saw that although Xiao Lingyu was in a sorry state, his face was extremely pale, and his state was very chaotic, but he had recovered his consciousness. They were all relieved. While recuperating, Xiao Lingyu discovered that there were a few more things in his dantian. After taking a closer look, he could not help but frown because he was not familiar with these things. They were not what he used to have. When and how did they enter his dantian? Could it be that I killed other experts and snatched them when I fell into madness? It should be. Xiao Lingyu could only think of such a possibility. Anyway, he had a few more treasures. It was not a bad thing, so he did not think too much about it. Xiao Lingyu was even more relieved when he moved those things out of his dantian and found that they were all ownerless. These three are all sacred artifacts. The quality is not bad. I can give them to Miao Ying and the others to protect themselves. I can't see the quality of this jade. It's not afraid of being burned by the primal chaos true fire. Could it be a divine spirit treasure? What was this bead? How could it contain such pure and dense soul power? Could it be a golden soul bead? It should be a golden soul bead, but the soul power in it seems to be more than 10 times more than my golden soul bead. It definitely doesn't belong to a holy god cultivator. Could it be a divine master? The jade and the golden soul bead quickly attracted Xiao Lingyu's attention. After looking at them carefully, Xiao Lingyu's face was not only surprised, but also excited and happy that he had received a windfall from the sky. After carefully inspecting his body, as well as his dantian and sea of consciousness, Xiao Lingyu calmed down and began to recuperate. Time passed faster in the primal chaos spectrum. Only a few months had passed in the outside world, and Xiao Lingyu had already recovered. Originally, Xiao Lingyu's injuries had been very serious, but during the battle, he and the 8 clones had eaten the flesh of the Heavenly Master Warriors, and the life essence of the Heavenly Master Warriors would naturally be of great help to him in recovering from his injuries. In addition, the heavenly fire that burned Xiao Lingyu previously also had a good healing effect, so he was able to recover quickly in the primal chaos spectrum. After recovering, Xiao Lingyu first communicated with the 3 girls, but did not get any useful information. Then, he came out of the primal chaos spectrum. The bright white flame burned his body again. Although Xiao Lingyu felt unbearably hot and his body was constantly burning, he was able to hold on for a while. However, Xiao Lingyu soon found that he was imprisoned in a narrow space. This narrow space looked like a crystal coffin, and the quality of this crystal coffin was extremely high. He could not break it at all. Chapter 691. The quality of this crystal coffin is extremely high, and there's such a powerful flame inside. There must be an extremely powerful expert guarding outside the crystal coffin. Even if I can get out, I'm afraid that I won't have a good time. It's better to stay inside for a while longer. After making up his mind, Xiao Yu temporarily gave up on the idea of breaking the crystal coffin. He stopped in front of a light door in the primal chaos spectrum, cultivating while paying attention to the situation outside. In the blink of an eye, a few million years passed in the primal chaos spectrum, while a few hundred years passed outside. Suddenly, one day, Xiao Yu saw the crystal coffin outside tremble. He quickly exited the primal chaos spectrum, then closed his eyes and lay in the crystal coffin. After the crystal coffin shook for a while, it appeared at the foot of the wall of the hall, and the woman was already standing in front of it. Xiao Yu was pretending to be unconscious at this time, and his divine sense couldn't penetrate the crystal coffin, so he naturally couldn't see the scene outside. However, he could guess that the owner of the crystal coffin must be watching him from outside. The woman was indeed staring at Xiao Yu in the crystal coffin. Seeing that Xiao Yu's body had recovered, she nodded in satisfaction and said, "The heavenly flame is restricted by the heavenly coffin, and it can only display less than 1/10,000th of its power. It can't burn him, but its healing effect is very obvious. His injuries seem to have healed. However, it's been so long, and he's been burned by the heavenly flame. Why hasn't he woken up?" The woman was a little suspicious, but seeing that there was no abnormality, she returned to the futon and continued to meditate, hiding the crystal coffin again. "I'll wait for another 1,000 years. If there's still no expert looking for him, I'll let him melt in the heavenly coffin," the woman thought before closing her eyes. When the woman turned around and returned to the futon, Xiao Yu boldly opened his eyes and glanced outside the heavenly coffin. Fortunately, he wasn't discovered by the woman. After the crystal coffin was hidden, Xiao Yu opened his eyes after a long time, but he couldn't see the scene outside. Returning to the primal chaos spectrum, Xiao Yu's expression was very gloomy. He muttered to himself, "Why does this place look like a temple? That cultivator, who looks like a beautiful woman from the back, is probably very powerful." The flames in the crystal coffin seemed to be slightly weaker. Xiao Yu then took out the 8-legged Tai Chi cauldron and turned it into the 8-legged monster. Then, she made the 8-legged monster's strength decrease. She then felt the power of the brilliant white flames, wanting to compare it with the brilliant white flames in the crystal coffin outside. This ball of brilliant white flame should be the possession of that ancient expert, Jiao Zhou. A flame that can catch his eye must be extremely powerful. However, because of the restriction of the 8-legged monster, it doesn't seem to be that powerful. If the white flame outside had already displayed its full power, it would only be slightly stronger than my primal chaos primordial fire. Since it's stronger than my chaotic primordial fire, doesn't that mean I can use it to temper my physical body? I should be able to give it a try. Even if that female expert suddenly opens the crystal coffin, I can immediately hide in the primal chaos spectrum. Thinking up to this point, Xiao Yu exited the primal chaos scroll and laid down in the crystal coffin. She let go of her defenses and allowed the flames to burn her body and soul. She circulated the fiery tempering technique and gradually attracted the flames to her body. In the blink of an eye, another few hundred years had passed. Xiao Yu had already completed 2/3 of the fiery tempering technique. At most, he would be able to end this cultivation in another 200 years. At this critical moment, the crystal coffin trembled slightly again. Xiao Yu had already planned this, so he wasn't worried. He still lay in the crystal coffin with his eyes closed, not moving at all. His entire body was being tempered at the same time. So from the outside, he was a bloody mess, looking very miserable. The woman only hurriedly looked at Xiao Yu in the crystal coffin, then hid the crystal coffin again and leaped out of the temple. It seems that he's still too injured to withstand the heavenly flames for a long time. However, no expert has come to find him for so many years, so it shouldn't be a problem for him to be burned to death in there. After the woman walked out of the temple, She leaped and flew to the large iron pillar in front of the temple's door. At this moment, the silent main peak and the 9 secondary peaks were extremely noisy. Countless serpent-headed experts had gathered in the plazas of the main and secondary peaks, and they all spat fire at the metal pillars in their respective plazas at the same time. From afar, the peaks of the main and auxiliary peaks looked as if they were all burning. At the top of the iron pillars and the squares of the main and auxiliary peaks, there was a dragon-headed elder standing. They all looked at the large iron pillar at the top of the main peak with solemn expressions. The sky above these 10 peaks was densely covered with dark clouds, and there were even bolts of lightning that flashed like dragons, letting out earth-shaking rumbles after they disappeared. This was a scene of dark clouds covering the sky, with raging winds and heavy rain pouring down. What was even more shocking was that the roars of demon beasts could be faintly heard from the rolling dark clouds. High in the sky, there was also a terrifying pressure that intimidated the dragon-headed cultivators in the mountain city. The woman stood at the top of the iron pillar and looked at the dark clouds in the sky. Then she opened her mouth and said, "Nine-clawed octopus king, over the years, you've repeatedly invaded the temple of my Dragonhead clan. Do you really think that my clan can be bullied by you?" The woman looked weak, but her voice was clear and it shook the world. No matter how strong the wind and rain were, no matter how thunder shook the 9 heavens, she could still be heard by all the dragon-headed cultivators in the mountain city. "Oomph! Your clan's previous prophet stole the heavenly coffin from my cave abode. Woman, you know this very well. Why do you have to play dumb in front of your own people? Return my heavenly coffin, and I'll leave immediately. I'll never come to your clan again." Within the dark clouds, an angry voice rang out. "Don't talk nonsense. Who in the Tongtian EC doesn't know that the heavenly coffin is my Dragonhead clan's inherited spiritual treasure? Your ancestor clearly borrowed it to go through the tribulation, but he failed. You juniors insist that the heavenly coffin is your 9-clawed octopus clan's treasure and forcefully stole it. My clan's previous prophet took back our inherited spiritual treasure in front of your father. How can you say that it was stolen?" The woman replied righteously, "What a joke. My 9-clawed octopus clan has a high status in the Tongtian EC. Why will we steal your clan's treasure? I advise you to be sensible and return the heavenly coffin. Otherwise, don't blame me for massacring your clan." The domineering voice came from the dark clouds again. "Nine-clawed octopus king, your ability to boast is the same as your strength. Every time you say that you'll massacre our clan, you always run away pathetically," the woman said disdainfully. "Don't think that the 9 heavens fire-gathering formation can guarantee your clan's eternal peace. Today, I'll break this formation." As soon as he finished speaking, 9 thick black tentacles that were no less than 10,000 feet long came crashing down from the dark clouds toward the 9 sub-peaks. The woman didn't waste any more time. With a shout, her entire body was wrapped in flames, and the flames quickly sank into the large iron pillar beneath her feet. The 9 old men with dragon heads who stood on the huge iron pillars on the other 9 sub-summits plazas also injected their true fire into the huge iron pillars that had already turned red from the heat. The powerhouses of the Flood Dragon clan gathered on the 10 sub-peaks plazas worked even harder to inject their true fire. Suddenly, the 9 large iron pillars on the sub-peaks shot up into the sky at the same time, and the 9 flames quickly gathered on the large iron pillar at the top of the main peak. Before the 9 black tentacles could land, a light screen that was like a large umbrella suddenly appeared, blocking all the ferocious tentacles outside. Then, the woman and the elder with dragon heads on the large iron pillars of the sub-peaks changed their hand seals at the same time, causing the fire dragons to soar from the large iron pillars and pounce on the dark clouds in the sky. The 9 fire dragons danced wantonly in the dark clouds, and in just a few moments, most of the dark clouds had dissipated. However, very soon, terrifying lightning flashed, and like peerless swords, they destroyed the 9 fire dragons. After most of the dark clouds that covered the sky dissipated, a huge octopus demon beast revealed most of its body in the sky. It waved its 9 black tentacles and smashed them fiercely at the umbrella-shaped light curtain that shrouded the entire mountain city. Every time the tentacles lashed out, the entire mountain city would shake violently along with the umbrella-shaped light screen. However, not only did the light screen show no signs of collapsing, but it kept spinning faster. As the light screen was spinning too fast, the tentacles that came crashing down were easily repelled. Moreover, as the light screen spun faster, flames began to appear on the surface of the light screen. The flames were extremely hot. Every time the tentacles came into contact with the flames, sizzling sounds would be heard, and thick black smoke would be emitted. The octopus monster beast with 9 black tentacles seemed to have gone mad. It ignored the pain from each of its tentacles and kept lashing out at the umbrella-shaped light screen. At the same time, it released terrifying lightning bolts to bombard the light screen. The stalemate lasted for nearly a month. Then, another wave of dark clouds rolled in from afar. The group of dark clouds soon arrived in front of them, and a small 9-clawed octopus demon beast was faintly discernible in the dark clouds. The 9-clawed octopus powerhouses that came later also joined the battle. They slapped the light screen with their tentacles, and at the same time, shot out lightning bolts to bombard it. However, even though the 9-clawed octopus powerhouses attacked with all their might, the light screen was still impregnable. The only difference was that the huge iron pillars on the 9 sub-peaks no longer shot out fire dragons to counterattack. The 9-clawed octopus clan attacked with all their might, but they suffered considerable damage due to the flames of the light screen. On the other hand, the Flood Dragon clan defended with all their might, trying their best to maintain the power of the 9 Heavens fire-gathering formation. Ordinary cultivators might not have imagined that the battle between the two clans lasted for nearly 100 years before there were any changes. Another 8 dark clouds surged in from all directions, forming an encirclement around the mountain city with the previous dark clouds. In less than an hour, the 9 dark clouds shone with azure light at the same time. Chapter 692. After the blue water droplets landed on the umbrella-shaped light screen, they immediately spread out and extinguished a large area of flames. At the place where the 9 blue lights gathered, the blue water droplets kept falling, causing great trouble for the 9 Heavens fire-gathering array. Ha ha! Little woman, my blooming water array is not bad, right? The 9-clawed octopus king's voice sounded again, but sounded very proud. The woman's expression was very solemn. The 9 Heavens fire-gathering array had been attacked by the enemy for more than a month. Whether it was the array itself or the experts of the Dragonhead clan maintaining the array, they had consumed a lot of energy and would not be able to hold on for much longer. Once the 9 Heavens fire-gathering array was broken, the Dragonhead clan could only fight head-on. Although they were not afraid, they would definitely suffer great losses. If not for the fact that she had no other choice, the woman, as the current prophet of the Dragonhead clan, would definitely not be willing to see the Dragonhead clan face a large-scale battle. This was because regardless of the outcome, the overall strength of the Dragonhead clan would plummet. If they were targeted by other clans, the Dragonhead clan would probably be removed from the Eastern Sea forever. Of course, if the 9-clawed octopus king really pressed on, the Dragonhead clan could only fight with all their might. In the sky, the blue water droplets were still dripping down. The light screen formed by the 9 Heavens fire-gathering array was in imminent danger. The flames on the surface were almost completely extinguished. Without the threat of the flames, the 9-clawed octopus king led the cultivators of the 9-clawed octopus clan to attack even more ferociously. Countless black tentacles of the 9-clawed octopus clan's experts ruthlessly whipped the umbrella-shaped light screen. The rotation speed of the entire light screen was already decreasing, and it was still trembling constantly. It was no longer as calm and unbreakable as before. The woman hesitated for a moment before stealing her heart. She quietly formed a set of seals and sent them into the huge iron pillar under her feet. Not long after, the nine heavens fire-gathering array seemed to have exhausted its power. A long hole was created by the nine-clawed octopus king's tentacles. Boys, the nine heavens fire-gathering array has been broken. Follow me in. The nine-clawed octopus king seemed very excited. Its huge body nimbly landed sideways and rushed in through the hole. The other experts from the nine-clawed octopus clan reacted quickly too. 5 saint gods and over 30 god emperors rushed into the light screen. However, when these nine-clawed octopus race powerhouses entered the light screen, the crack in the light screen suddenly disappeared and blocked all the other nine-clawed octopus race cultivators who were about to enter. Little woman, you even know how to scheme. The nine-clawed octopus king's enormous body was on the main peak. Its voice shook the mountains. The woman remained silent, but her hands quickly formed seals. When the nine-clawed octopus king swept one of its tentacles over, she shouted, "Gather fire!" As soon as she finished speaking, the 9 secondary peaks shook violently together. Then, the flames they shot toward the main peak became even more majestic. As for the iron pillar on the main peak, after receiving all the flames from the secondary peaks, it was enveloped in raging flames along with the woman on top of the iron pillar. At this moment, the woman waved her arm, and more than a dozen fire dragons rushed out from her sleeves. They bared their fangs and brandished their claws as they pounced toward the nine-clawed octopus king. In an instant, the nine-clawed octopus king was surrounded by more than a dozen fire dragons. It kept waving its tentacles to resist and could no longer attack. As for the remaining nine-clawed octopus race powerhouses who broke into the Great Formation, they were naturally dealt with by the other experts from the Flood Dragon clan. The woman quickly changed her hand seals and shouted, "Borrow fire." The Flood Dragon elders who were overseeing the 9 secondary peaks also changed their hand seals at the same time and cooperated with the woman to control the 9 heavens fire-gathering array. When the hand seals were completed, the umbrella-shaped light screen spun even faster. Strangely, the space that stretched for tens of thousands of kilometers with the mountain city as the center was filled with flames. A sea of fire formed in just a few moments. This sea of fire kept stirring up waves of fire that surged toward the mountain city. The fire elemental energy rapidly gathered in the 9 heavens fire-gathering array. At the same time, it posed a great threat to the 9-clawed octopus race cultivators who were hiding in the dark clouds outside. Only then did the woman stop her hand seals. However, she spat out a few mouthfuls of blood along with the 9 elders who were overseeing the secondary peaks. Obviously, it was not an easy task to make the 9 heavens fire-gathering array unleash its power like this. The fire elemental energy released from the 9 secondary peaks was rapidly entering the woman's body, causing her aura to continuously rise. You little woman, if you forcefully increase your strength, you might be able to fight with me. Even if I can't win against you after this battle, your realm will drop a lot. The 9-clawed octopus king had just defeated the dozen or so fire dragons. Seeing the woman's aura continue to rise, it said disdainfully, "Don't talk about after this battle, because after this battle, you, the 9-clawed octopus king, might no longer exist." The woman replied with a sneer. What big words! The 9-clawed octopus king obviously did not believe it. Its 9 black tentacles swept toward the main peak at the same time. The woman let out a loud shout. Immediately, 9 fire dragons pounced out from her body and met one of the tentacles. Flames burst out, and the explosion shook the sky. The 9 fire dragons repelled the 9-clawed octopus king's 9 tentacles, while the flames on the woman's body grew stronger and her aura became stronger. Looks like I'll have to show my true abilities. Otherwise, I won't be able to take you down, little woman. The 9-clawed octopus king's body began to shine with a dark blue radiance. Its 9 tentacles swayed together, and countless blue light swords suddenly formed, forming a rain of swords that rained down on the iron pillar on the main peak. The woman charged toward the nine-clawed octopus king while dragging a long trail of fire behind her as she faced the rain of swords. Even though she was already far away from the iron pillar on the main peak, the woman was still receiving the fire elemental energy from the array. As the woman moved forward, a small umbrella-shaped light screen blocked her front and destroyed all the swords in her path. The woman was extremely fast. Almost in an instant, she had already flown in front of the nine-clawed octopus king. After a flash, she was behind the nine-clawed octopus king. However, the woman's delicate body seemed insignificant in front of the nine-clawed octopus king. If it were not for the fact that she was bathed in flames, no one would be able to see her. The nine-clawed octopus king kept waving its 9 tentacles, but it could not hit the woman on its back no matter how hard it tried. The woman appeared to be very agile, as she kept hitting the nine-clawed octopus king's body with streaks of fire. The nine-clawed octopus king could have dodged the woman's attack, but the space in the nine heavens fire-gathering formation was a little narrow for it, so it was unable to do so. It could not help but feel a little regretful. It should not have charged in just now, but it was clearly an opportunity. With its temper and strength, it could not have held back. After all, the Gue water formation did pose a threat to the nine heavens fire-gathering formation. At that time, it really thought that the nine heavens fire-gathering formation could not withstand the attack and had opened an opening. Most importantly, it did not expect the woman to damage her cultivation base to perform a secret array technique to increase her strength. Nevertheless, the nine-clawed octopus king, who was much stronger than the woman, was not afraid even if they were to fight here. After realizing its disadvantage, the nine-clawed octopus king's body suddenly turned into a dark blue ball of light. Then, the ball of light dissipated, and it transformed into a human form. It looked like a middle-aged human cultivator wearing a black battle armor. Then, everyone saw an inky blue ball of light and a fiery red ball of light fighting each other on the main peak. Because both sides were very fast, everyone could only see 2 streams of light constantly flashing. They couldn't see the specific situation of the battle clearly. While the woman was fighting, she was constantly receiving the fire attribute energy transmission from the formation. Her strength was still rising, and her aura was extremely powerful. In the torrential sea of fire outside, countless nine-clawed octopus king defended against the surging fire waves while continuing to attack the umbrella-shaped light screen. However, without the nine-clawed octopus king's powerful attacks, the umbrella-shaped light screen was under a lot less pressure. However, only the woman and the powerhouses of the Flood Dragon clan knew that they would not be able to hold on for too long with the nine heavens fire-gathering formation's power. They were all sacrificing their cultivation base to maintain the formation. The longer the formation lasted, the greater the loss of their cultivation base. They might even be in danger of losing their lives. In the sky, the nine-clawed octopus king and the woman were evenly matched. Even with the formation increasing her strength, the woman could only barely fight the nine-clawed octopus king. After all, the difference in their strength was too great. The nine-clawed octopus king seemed to know that the formation could not hold on for too long, so the more it fought, the more confident it became. Moreover, it deliberately dragged the fight, unwilling to fight the woman who was eager to fight to the death. If this continued, the situation would become more and more critical for the Flood Dragon clan. Everyone, sacrifice yourselves for our clan. A Flood Dragon clan elder who was overseeing the sub-peak shouted loudly. Sacrifice yourselves for our clan. The elders of the other 8 peaks echoed at the same time. The 9 Flood Dragon clan elders on the sub-peaks made the same hand seals at the same time. After the hand seals were made, their bodies suddenly turned into dazzling balls of fire and quickly fell into the big iron pillars they were sitting on. The 9 big iron pillars burst into flames at the same time, and the fire elemental energy transmitted to the main peak was naturally more vigorous. The big iron pillars on the main peak began to shake continuously, and there were even bursts of clanging sounds. A stronger and more obvious fire elemental energy was madly injected into the woman's body. "No!" the woman exclaimed, but it was too late to stop the 8 powerhouses from sacrificing themselves. She could only feel her strength rapidly increasing again. Nine-clawed octopus king, go to hell. The woman originally thought that she would fight the nine-clawed octopus king until both sides were injured or even perished together. However, she did not expect the 9 elders of her clan to take action. To be honest, the powerhouses of the Flood Dragon clan knew that the clan could afford to lose a few elders, but they could not afford to lose a prophet. After the woman cried out in grief, she rushed toward the 9-clawed octopus king like a rainbow piercing the sun. Her momentum was so strong that it made the 9-clawed octopus king's heart palpitate. Chapter 693. The 9-clawed octopus monarch could sense that the woman's strength had become much stronger than it with the help of the formation. In addition, the 9-clawed octopus monarch was now in the 9 heavens fire-gathering formation, so its strength was already weakened. It had entered because it knew that it was stronger than the woman, but now that she was stronger than it, it had no chance of winning with the help of the formation. It could not even hold her back. Therefore, the 9-clawed octopus monarch finally felt threatened and realized the danger. The 9-clawed octopus monarch did not dare to fight the woman, so it kept dodging and attacking the umbrella-shaped light screen with all its might in an attempt to escape. Unfortunately, the 9-clawed octopus monarch still had to resist the woman's wild attacks and could not attack the umbrella-shaped light screen with all its might. Even if it could, it would not be able to break the light screen in a short time. The woman chased after the 9-clawed octopus monarch as fire dragons kept surging out of her body. In the blink of an eye, the sky near the main peak was filled with fire dragons. None of the 9-clawed octopus clan powerhouses who came in with the 9-clawed octopus monarch were left. Only the 9-clawed octopus monarch was still fleeing in a sorry state. More than half of the energy provided by the 9 WRM elders at the cost of their lives surged into the woman's body with the help of the 9 heavens fire-gathering formation. A small portion was used to maintain the 9 heavens fire-gathering formation. Even though the sea of fire outside had dissipated, the 9-clawed octopus clan cultivators would find it difficult to break the 9 heavens fire-gathering formation from the outside. The fire dragons dancing in the sky made it impossible for the 9-clawed octopus monarch to escape. At that moment, it did not dare to transform into its true form. Otherwise, with its huge body, it would suffer even more attacks. However, even if it transformed into its human form and its body became much more agile, the 9-clawed octopus monarch was still surrounded by many fire dragons. It constantly had to face the attacks of the fire dragons and be on guard against the woman's powerful attacks that could be launched at any time. In the beginning, the 9-clawed octopus monarch was still able to resist the fire dragons and the woman's attacks with all its might. However, after an hour, its condition had clearly deteriorated and it became more and more difficult to resist. The 9-clawed octopus king was destined to be defeated in this battle after the WRM elder sacrificed his life. Before the 9-clawed octopus monarch came, it actually thought that it might be defeated. However, it never expected that it would be in such a pathetic state and encounter with such great danger. Another hour passed, and the 9-clawed octopus king was too weak. It knew that it would die if it continued like this, so it thought of the life-saving secret method of its clan. After hesitating for a long time, the 9-clawed octopus king still could not find a better solution. It steeled its heart and stood still on the spot. Its body was quickly frozen by a layer of ink-blue ice crystals. The previously arrogant 9-clawed octopus king had turned into an ink-blue ice sculpture and maintained its human form. No matter how the fire dragons attacked, the statue was not damaged in the slightest, but it no longer displayed any power. It was obvious that the 9-clawed octopus king had used a special technique to seal itself. Furthermore, the seal had an extremely strong defensive power. The woman was furious that 9 of her clan's elders had died. She kept attacking the ice sculpture, but even though she was very strong now, she couldn't break the ice sculpture. She couldn't even leave a crack on it. The woman calmed down a little and used her power to wrap the ice sculpture. Then, she formed a hand seal and made a hole in the light screen of the 9 heavens fire-gathering array. However, the woman charged out alone and attacked the 9-clawed octopus clan cultivators outside. Countless fire dragons flew out of the woman's sleeves and pounced at the 9-clawed octopus clan cultivators. In an instant, the dark clouds were scattered and the 9-clawed octopus clan cultivators died under the fire dragon's attack. Then, countless powerhouses of the Dragonhead clan charged out. Without the 9-clawed octopus king, the 9-clawed octopus clan army immediately collapsed and fled in all directions. Both the 9-clawed octopus clan and the Dragonhead clan had undoubtedly suffered heavy losses in this battle. Although the 9-clawed octopus clan was defeated and the 9-clawed octopus king was captured, the Dragonhead clan, which was not very strong to begin with, had also lost 9 Saint God elders. They were also greatly weakened. After the 9-clawed octopus clan army retreated, the woman stopped the 9 heavens fire-gathering array and urged the other powerhouses of the clan to do their best to maintain the overall situation of the clan. In the end, the woman took the 9-clawed octopus king's ice sculpture back to the sacred temple. She used all sorts of methods, but was unable to do anything to the ice sculpture, so her desire for revenge was dashed. Moreover, the woman was not in good condition. Maintaining the 9 heavens fire-gathering array had already taken a great toll on her, and her cultivation was not very strong. In the end, she received the cultivation imparting from the 9 elders. Although it had greatly increased her strength, it had also damaged her cultivation. She had to quickly recuperate for a while. Don't think that I can't do anything to you. I'll let you have a taste of the heavenly fire in the heavenly coffin. As she spoke, the woman had already formed a seal and sent it into the 9 iron pillars around her. The 9 pillars then each released a beam of divine light that hit the wall opposite the door. After a moment of shaking, a crystal coffin appeared under the wall. Xiaoling Yu was still lying in the crystal coffin, still a bloody mess. The woman did not look at Xiaoling Yu. With a wave of her hand, the 9-clawed octopus king's eye sculpture was sent into the crystal coffin and stacked on top of Xiaoling Yu's body. The crystal coffin was then hidden again. The woman had no choice but to recuperate for a while. Even if she wanted to take revenge, she had to stabilize her condition first. Xiaoling Yu naturally did not know what was going on. However, he had already reached the final stage of tempering his body. Naturally, he could not stop because of the ice sculpture's appearance. Ignoring the ice sculpture, Xiaoling Yu continued to temper his body. However, to his surprise, the ice sculpture did not react at all under the burning of the brilliant white flames. Its quality was probably not inferior to an ordinary sacred artifact. The ice sculpture's lack of reaction was a good thing for Xiaoling Yu. At least his cultivation would not be affected. Another 200 years passed in a hurry. Xiaoling Yu finally finished tempering his body. The quality of his body should be much stronger than an ordinary sacred artifact. If sacred artifacts were divided into 3 grades, his body should be comparable to a high-grade sacred artifact. After finishing his cultivation, he focused his attention on the ink blue ice sculpture. Restricted by the flames in the crystal coffin, Xiaoling Yu could not see what was going on. He simply brought the ice sculpture into the primal chaos spectrum. This is definitely a kind of self-sealing. Perhaps it's just to resolve a temporary danger. The knowledgeable Miao Ing said with certainty. It seems to be a human expert, but I feel that he has a demonic aura on him, Qing Xian said. He's not a human cultivator. He should be some kind of demonic beast in human form, Miaoing said. Xiaoling Yu and the others surrounded the ice sculpture and studied it. However, no matter how they studied it, they could not find anything useful. Left with no choice, Xiaoling Yu could only put the ice sculpture back into the crystal coffin. The woman had recuperated for 1,000 years before her condition stabilized. She, who was still far from a complete recovery, brought the crystal coffin out again. This time, after Xiao Lingyu discovered that the crystal coffin was trembling, he first released the ice sculpture. Before he could enter the crystal coffin was already exposed at the bottom of the wall, so he simply didn't go out. Huh? A human cultivator's body has been incinerated into nothingness? The woman was a little puzzled. Then why is his magic treasure gone? Could it be that his magic treasure's quality was not high and was also incinerated? However, that human cultivator had no enmity with the woman, so she did not care too much about him. At the moment, she was most concerned about the nine-clawed octopus king's ice sculpture. Nine-clawed evildoer, I'll let you have a taste of heavenly fire now. The woman returned to the futon and sat down. Then, she continuously formed various seals and sent them into the heavenly coffin. Suddenly, the brilliant white flames in the heavenly coffin seemed to have gone crazy. They burned fiercely and their power kept increasing. The woman kept forming seals and occasionally spat out a mouthful of essence blood. She seemed to be very serious. After an entire day, the surface of the ink blue ice sculpture finally emitted wisps of mist. The flames inside now have such a powerful power. It seems to be comparable to the brilliant white flames in the eight-legged Tai Chi cauldron. Xiao Lingyu, who was in the chaos spectrum, looked at the ice sculpture in the crystal coffin in astonishment. The woman stopped casting spells, but the heavenly fire in the heavenly coffin maintained its power. The nine-clawed octopus king's ice sculpture was slowly melting. After burning for 10 years, the ice sculpture finally melted completely. The powerful flames had already burned the nine-clawed octopus king's body. Although the nine-clawed octopus king's body was strong, it was definitely not comparable to the layer of ice. Otherwise, it would not have sealed itself. Therefore, its body was quickly ignited and waves of mighty energy began to overflow. Should I save it? Xiao Lingyu hesitated. In the end, he chose to put the nine-clawed octopus king into the chaos spectrum. In Xiao Lingyu's opinion, the powerhouse who put himself in the crystal coffin must have bad intentions and could be considered his enemy. Xiao Lingyu naturally had reason to believe that this self-sealed expert was also an enemy of the owner of the crystal coffin, since he had placed the self-sealed expert in the crystal coffin to be burned. Even if an enemy of an enemy could not become a friend, they might become temporary companions. The powerhouse who sealed himself must have a better understanding of the owner of the crystal coffin and might have a good way to leave the crystal coffin. The powerful flames released by the crystal coffin also attracted Xiao Lingyu's attention. He felt that it would be very difficult for him to leave the crystal coffin. However, what made Xiao Lingyu depressed was that although the powerhouse who sealed himself was invited into the chaos spectrum, there were no signs of him waking up. Xiao Lingyu also could not extinguish the flames on his body. A large amount of pure divine power overflowed from the powerhouse who sealed himself. I want to save you, but I can't. You can't waste your energy. Xiao Lingyu took out the black pearl and began to guide the energy overflowing from the powerhouse into the black pearl. The powerhouse's energy should be able to change the pearl, Xiao Lingyu thought. Chapter 694. The nine-clawed octopus monarch's body had just begun to melt in the woman's eyes when it suddenly disappeared. She was extremely surprised. What's going on? It can't be burned into nothingness in an instant, right? The woman exclaimed with a doubtful look. She then cast a series of spells, but no matter what she did, the coffin remained empty. There must be a problem. The woman refused to believe that the nine-clawed octopus monarch's body had been burned into nothingness in an instant. She narrowed her eyes and said, "I'll burn you for a while longer. Let's see what tricks you can play." Perhaps because she was still worried, the woman cast another spell to increase the power of the heavenly fire in the coffin. The woman also refused to believe that the nine-clawed octopus monarch had already escaped from the coffin. She felt that the nine-clawed octopus monarch must have cast another spell to hide and trick her into opening the coffin. The woman was quite patient. She calmly sat on the square futon and calmed her heart to regulate her breathing. After 10 years in the chaos spectrum, the nine-clawed octopus monarch's body was completely incinerated. However, all of its essence energy had been absorbed by the black bead. Xiaoling Yu did not know that the nine-clawed octopus monarch was an extremely powerful powerhouse. The nine-clawed octopus monarch's energy was naturally extremely dense. After absorbing the nine-clawed octopus monarch's energy, the oval-shaped black bead underwent a great change. The thin red line in the middle became thicker, and the center of the red line occupied half of the entire black bead. At that moment, even Xiaoling Yu would feel dizzy if he stared at the bead for 10 breaths. "It looks more like an eyeball now," Miaoying said with a frown. Xiaoling Yu also had the same feeling. However, the bead did not reveal any dangerous aura, so he was rather relieved. There were no signs of the crystal coffin being opened. Xiaoling Yu did not dare act on his own and could only continue to wait in the chaos spectrum. When he had nothing to do, Xiaoling Yu would inject 30% of his divine power, blood essence, and soul power into the bead. He would then continue to inject them when he recovered. As he gradually lost his patience, he cast a spell and infused the soul power from the golden soul bead in his dantian into this round bead. The golden soul bead was left behind by the heaven-reaching realm expert who had been eaten alive in the city. Naturally, it contained a very strong spiritual energy. Just like that, thousands of years passed in the outside world, and tens of millions of years passed in the chaotic spectrum. Finally, there was a greater movement from a bead. After it absorbed the energy that Xiaoling Yu had poured into it again, it suddenly trembled slightly. Xiaoling Yu naturally noticed the commotion. He cautiously moved 300 feet away and stared at the bead cautiously. After looking at it for 2 breaths of time, he already felt dizzy and had no choice but to look away. Xiaoling Yu had just shifted her gaze when the black and red ball suddenly emitted a dazzling light. After the light shone, a shocking aura suddenly surged out. It actually pushed Xiaoling Yu, who was on full alert, back a few hundred feet away. Xiaoling Yu, who was extremely shocked, had just stabilized his body when he saw that there was a huge shadow where the bead was. The shadow was more than 10 feet tall, but it was in the shape of a human and looked very mighty. What surprised Xiaoling Yu the most was that the black bead was now in the middle of the shadow's eyebrows. It was like a vertical eye. The shadow's 3 eyes were staring at Xiaoling Yu. After a while, the vertical eye suddenly doubled in size. A bloody light with a destructive aura shot towards Xiaoling Yu. When the bloody light shot towards him, Xiaoling Yu actually felt that his entire body could not move. He also felt a sense of urgency, as if he was about to be destroyed. In his heart, in his soul, and in the depths of his consciousness, there was a warning. Even Xiaoling Yu's body was trembling at this moment. Xiaoling Yu had never felt such a sense of danger, even when he was attacked by a divine master from the Dorsal Fin clan. The attack brought about by the bloody light made Xiaoling Yu feel that he was definitely going to die. However, this was the space of the chaotic spectrum after all. When such a powerful attack was unleashed in the chaotic spectrum, it was blocked by the chaotic spectrum. The bloody light had only flown halfway when the space in its path was distorted. An invisible force weakened the power of the bloody light by more than half. However, even a small portion of the sanguine light still struck Xiaoling Yu's body. Even with the help of the chaos spectrum, Xiaoling Yu couldn't dodge it. He could only use his arm to block the sanguine light. The bloody light blasted onto Xiaoling Yu's arm. In an instant, his arm was blasted into countless pieces. Xiaoling Yu's body was also sent flying far away. After stabilizing himself, he was even more shocked and had a look of disbelief on his face. His arm was stronger than an ordinary divine weapon. However, it was so fragile under the attack of the bloody light. If he had been hit by the full power of the bloody light, wouldn't he have been killed immediately? Xiaoling Yu was secretly glad that he had caused a round bead to change in the chaotic spectrum. If he had been outside, he would have lost his life. Losing an arm was nothing. He could recover it with some time. However, if the vertical eye continued to attack him, he would be in danger. Fortunately, the vertical eye did not attack again. The tall human figure suddenly said, "If you can withstand the attack of the heavenly eye of destruction, you are qualified to obtain it." After saying this, the tall illusory figure suddenly disappeared, and the vertical eye quietly floated in the air. Xiao Lingyu observed and waited for a long time. When he saw that the vertical eye was no longer moving and that he no longer felt dizzy from staring at it, he was slightly relieved. The vertical eye had now returned to its original appearance when Xiao Lingyu first saw it. Most of it was black, but there was a thin red line in the middle. Xiao Lingyu gathered his courage and held the vertical eye in his hand. No matter how he looked at it, it did not seem to have changed much. That figure said that I am qualified to obtain it. How do I get it? Xiao Lingyu frowned and pondered. If he could obtain this treasure called the Heavenly Eye of Destruction, it would undoubtedly allow him to have another powerful attack method. This attack method was enough to threaten the existence of the divine master powerhouses. The reason why the vertical eye had returned to its original appearance was probably because the energy within it had been exhausted. Even if I take it for myself, it won't be easy to make it attack once. I've poured so much energy into it, and it has already returned to its original state after just one attack. With my current strength, even if I pour all the energy in my body into it at once, I'm afraid it won't be able to launch an attack like that again. Xiao Lingyu thought gloomily. Xiao Lingyu had many ways to make this vertical eye into a treasure that truly belonged to him. The simplest method was to drip blood on it to make it recognize him as its owner. A drop of essence blood fell on the surface of the vertical eye. Unsurprisingly, the vertical eye absorbed the essence blood as before. However, the drop of essence blood had just merged with the vertical eye for less than a breath's time. With a flash, it flew directly towards Xiao Lingyu's face. Xiao Lingyu did not have time to react. He felt a pain between his eyebrows, and then waves of tearing pain came from his head. Waves of strange and irresistible energy spread throughout his body from between his eyebrows. Even the soul in his sea of consciousness was no exception. After a few breaths, Xiao Lingyu fainted. In the coma, Xiao Lingyu's body was shining with bursts of red light. His body was still twitching constantly, and in between his eyebrows, a red vertical line slowly appeared. It was as fine as the red vertical line in the center of the black vertical eye, but it could be seen clearly. At this time, the three women who felt a big movement in the primal chaos spectrum rushed over. Seeing Xiao Lingyu like this, they were very worried, but no one acted rashly. After waiting for hundreds of years, the red light on Xiao Lingyu's body dissipated, and he gradually woke up. After waking up, he opened his eyes. Touching his eyebrows, Xiao Lingyu did not feel anything unusual. Then he said to the three women, "Don't worry, I'm fine." I should have gotten an opportunity. What opportunity? Tell us quickly. Qing Xian asked curiously. The bead that looks like an eyeball. It's called the Heavenly Eye of Destruction. It seems to have run in my eyebrows. Xiao Lingyu paused for a moment before replying. Heavenly Eye of Destruction. What a domineering name. Miaoing praised calmly. Is it this red vertical line? Open it and let us see. Qing Xian said eagerly. Xiao Lingyu paused again. He silently tried to open it and said gloomily, I can't open it now. It seems like it needs to store enough power to be effective. Then why is your arm missing? Qing Xian asked again. It was destroyed by the red light of the Heavenly Eye of Destruction. Xiao Lingyu replied. Qing Xian and Miao Ying began to talk intermittently. From start to finish, Ling remained silent and indifferent. Of course, Ling was also concerned about Xiao Lingyu. However, she could not be as obvious as Qing Xian and Miao Ying. In the following days, Xiao Lingyu constantly tried to familiarize himself with the Eye of Destruction, but he didn't make any progress at all. Apart from being able to continuously pour his divine force, essence blood, and soul force into it, he couldn't do anything else. In his boredom, Xiao Yu took out the golden armored puppet that he also did not know where he got it from. The golden armored puppet had suffered some damage. Fortunately, the damage was not severe. Xiao Yu planned to refine it again. Xiao Yu did not know that the golden armored puppet was left behind by the immortal ascension expert he had given birth to in the siege. Since it was something that an immortal ascension expert relied heavily on, it was naturally extraordinary. Chapter 695. Perhaps it was because she needed too much time to recover, or because she was very patient, but she did not look at the coffin again. Instead, she meditated quietly on the square cushion. Xiao Yu had studied the chaotic scroll for close to 1,000 years before comprehending the technique to refine the golden armored puppet. Afterwards, she used the primordial chaotic flames to refine the golden armored puppet. Naturally, she had to add some special materials during the process. The method to refine the puppet recorded in the jade slip was actually a little cruel. It involved capturing a living cultivator and using a secret technique to break down various materials of extremely high quality before fusing them into the cultivator's body. It would make the cultivator's body as tough as an enchanted treasure. The cultivator could not die during the entire process, or their body would collapse, or their life essence would be lost, and the refinement would fail. As a result, the cultivator who was being refined would be tormented. Once all the materials fused with the cultivator's body, the cultivator's original consciousness would be erased, and some other memories would be poured into the cultivator's soul to create a very obedient puppet. Furthermore, the puppet's original realm would not be affected. However, a puppet refined in this way would have its body completely metallized. Its soul and nature would have changed, so it could no longer be considered alive. Even if one possessed extraordinary abilities, it would be impossible to revive or recover it. The golden armored puppet that Xiao Yu had obtained was of the same quality as the golden armor it wore. It was no weaker than regular saint artifacts, and its consciousness only contained the memories of various battle techniques. It was a powerful weapon of mass destruction. The golden armored puppet was not severely damaged. Xiao Yu did not lack saint artifact quality materials either. With the assistance of the refinement method, it was naturally very easy for her to recover. After all, it was not alive, so it would be fine even if she casually burned it with the primordial chaotic flames. The life essence and fleshly energy in its body had been completely sealed off by the various materials that had fused into its body. No matter how much damage it received, there would be no loss of life essence. After refining the golden armored puppet, Xiao Yu saw that the crystal coffin still showed no signs of opening, so she continued to meditate and cultivate. She comprehended the small words in the depths of her soul. At the same time, she poured energy into the vertical eye between her eyebrows. In his dantian, the chaotic divine infant was also releasing chaotic true fire at the same time, refining the chair and the extremely high-quality jade slip. What Xiao Yu did not expect was that the vertical eye between her eyebrows would no longer accept any more energy after she had injected nearly 100 times of energy into it. Furthermore, Xiao Yu felt that she could now open the vertical eye between her eyebrows and launch an attack. Every time Xiao Yu injected a third of the energy in his body into the vertical eye, this included primal chaos, divine power, blood essence, and soul energy. The total amount of energy infused 100 times was more than 30 times Xiao Yu's total energy. Just as Xiao Yu expected, even if he poured all the energy in his body into it, it was still far from enough for the Heaven's Eye of Destruction to launch an attack. However, before being locked in the crystal coffin, Xiao Yu had injected energy into the vertical eye countless times. He had even injected all the energy in the nine-clawed octopus king and the soul energy in the golden soul bead left behind by the earth-reaching powerhouse into the Heaven's Eye of Destruction. Only then did it emit the red light of destruction once. Compared to the total amount of energy that Xiao Yu had injected into it, 30 times the energy in his body was nothing. In other words, it was much easier to launch the Heaven's Eye of Destruction than before. This might have something to do with the fact that the Heaven's Eye of Destruction had already recognized its master. However, Xiaoling Yu's Heaven's Eye of Destruction should have been sealed before. Most of the energy that he had injected into it before was used to break the seal and activate the Heaven's Eye of Destruction. In any case, it was a good thing for Xiaoling Yu that the Heaven's Eye of Destruction could launch an attack more easily than before. He did not need to think too much about this issue. Outputting 30 times the energy in Xiaoling Yu's body in one go would form an attack. Xiaoling Yu felt that even if it could not kill an earth-reaching powerhouse, it would be enough to seriously injure him. This kind of remarkable ability, in particular, was completely unknown to others. Launching it suddenly would be a very good sneak attack. Even an earth-reaching powerhouse might not have 30 times as much energy as Xiaoling Yu. In other words, an ordinary earth-reaching powerhouse might barely be able to launch an attack with the Heaven's Eye of Destruction. Xiaoling Yu had been comprehending the small characters on the light screen in the chaotic spectrum for many years. He could understand the meaning of every word and the meaning of many sentences. Xiaoling Yu had always been confused about the essence of a short paragraph or the whole passage, and the benefits and guidance it would provide for his cultivation. Every time, he felt that he had grasped something, but when he thought about it carefully, he realized that he had not grasped anything. He was just short of kicking the door, but he had repeatedly kicked the air. However, as long as he pierced through that thin layer of window paper, as long as he kicked the door, Xiaoling Yu would be able to open a new world. It could be said that he had achieved the great perfection of the chaotic Great Enlightenment stage and had the strength to break through to the 9th transformation stage. Once I reach the 9th transformation stage, I should not be afraid of most earth-reaching powerhouses, right? With beautiful expectations, Xiaoling Yu worked even harder in his cultivation. He read the contents of the small characters over and over again in his heart. Unfortunately, his comprehension was too average, and it was difficult for him to suddenly gain enlightenment. The woman in the Dragon Head tribe's sacred temple had waited for nearly 10,000 years this time. She once again invited the heavenly coffin out. What puzzled her was that the heavenly coffin was still empty. Could it be that the 9-clawed octopus king really used some heaven-defying secret technique to escape? The woman frowned. She had almost recovered. Although her realm had dropped a lot and her overall strength was less than half of what it used to be, this was her tribe's sacred temple after all. There was nothing for her to fear. If the 9-clawed octopus king had hidden itself, its strength would probably be much weaker than before after being burned by the heavenly fire for so many years. The woman did not continue to hesitate. She waved her hand, and the heavenly coffin's lid opened. It was also at this moment that a figure suddenly flew out from the empty heavenly coffin. The woman's heart skipped a beat. She hurriedly took a few steps back and quickly formed a seal to send it into the surrounding large iron pillars. Before the 9 large iron pillars could react, the figure had already turned into a young cultivator. This young cultivator had a yellowish complexion and was not very tall. His body was well-proportioned and strong. A pair of eyes were as bright as stars. There was a red vertical line between his thick and straight eyebrows. It was Xiaoling Yu, who had come out of the chaotic spectrum. The woman relaxed a little when she saw that it was not the 9-clawed octopus king, but the unconscious human cultivator who had been sent into the heavenly coffin. She did not let the 9 large iron pillars release the prepared attack. "Why are you here?" the woman asked curiously. Xiaoling Yu could guess why the woman asked such a question. With a smile on his face, he cupped his fists in salute and replied, "Even if it was me, I was almost burned alive." As he spoke, Xiaoling Yu's mind was highly focused. Once this woman showed signs of attacking, he would immediately hide in the primal chaos spectrum. "Since you're fine, you should know what happened to the person who went in later, right?" the woman asked with narrowed eyes. "He was burned to ashes," Xiaoling Yu said straightforwardly. Xiaoling Yu was very knowledgeable and had traveled to countless tribes. He was not surprised by the woman's strange appearance at all. At that moment, the woman sensed that the door of the sacred temple was being pulled. She opened the door with a wave of her hand, and a holy deity expert of her tribe entered. After the holy deity elder entered, he only glanced at Xiao Yu in surprise before sending a voice transmission to the woman. The woman frowned. She seemed very doubtful because the holy deity elder had said that the nine-clawed octopus clan had chosen a new nine-clawed octopus king. In other words, the nine-clawed octopus clan had confirmed that the original nine-clawed octopus king had died. Otherwise, they would not dare to choose a new octopus king. Could he really have been burned to ashes by the heavenly flames? The woman was still doubtful, but since the nine-clawed octopus king was dead and had probably died in the heavenly coffin, there was no need for her to think about anything else. You're really an extraordinary person. You actually managed to survive the heavenly flames. You must be from Skirich Island, right? Asked the woman. You can say that. Xiao Yu nodded and said, I don't think I have any enmity with your race. Why did you burn me in the heavenly flames? The woman said directly, You were unconscious in our territory and were sent here by our cultivators. They couldn't tell friend from foe, so they had no choice but to be cautious. Xiao Yu did not pursue the matter. Instead, he asked, Can I leave now? Of course, said the woman without hesitation. In the woman's opinion, this human expert's strength was unfathomable. Moreover, he was not afraid of the heavenly flames. He was definitely an extraordinary expert and should not be made an enemy of. The Nine-Clawed clan had just suffered a great calamity and had lost a great number of experts. As a prophet, she had suffered a great loss in cultivation as well. She was truly unable to go through another battle. After all, this human expert had no enmity with the Nine-Clawed clan. Since he did not mind being burned by the heavenly flames, why should the Nine-Clawed clan find trouble with him? The door of the sacred temple was wide open. Xiao Yu immediately walked towards the door. However, just as he reached the door, Xiao Yu looked back at the crystal coffin at the foot of the wall opposite the door. When Xiao Yu turned around, the woman immediately became nervous. She thought that Xiao Yu was interested in the clan's inheritance treasure. Xiao Yu only smiled and walked out of the door. He arrived at the plaza at the top of the main peak. Xiao Yu did not pay too much attention to the large metal pillar in the plaza. He immediately took out his tubular saint artifact. Before he could use greater teleportation, Xiao Yu turned around and said to the woman, Can you give me a map of the nearby territory? The woman seemed to be anxiously waiting for Xiao Yu to leave. She immediately tossed a jade slip to Xiao Yu. After catching the jade slip, Xiao Yu used his divine sense to look at it. Only then did he use greater teleportation to leave the Nine-Clawed clan in an instant. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.